you very much. All right. This open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the September 30th, 2020 meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee at 7 p.m. I am Narissa Wallen, Chair of the Triton Regional School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Erin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Goldner?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Maureen?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Lees?
Hey, Narissa, I'm here. I can hear you.
Thanks, Paul. Linda?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Myatt?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. And Tina?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Superintendent Brian Forget?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Kim Croto?
I'm here and I can hear you too.
Thank you. School Business Administrator Kyle Warren?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Special Education Director David McGee?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, and anticipated on the agenda tonight, we have, I believe, representatives from all 3 of our town health departments and all 5 of our nurses. I don't want to go through you all individually, I don't think, but if any of you are having audio or video or any video issues, can you just give me a wave now so that we can hopefully fix those? All right, I think we're good then. Okay. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All right. So welcome everyone to the September 30th meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee. I'm going to keep my remarks short because I know everyone is looking for the information that's going to come further down on the agenda. But I wanted to just quickly read aloud the district's vision statement because I think that's obviously an important facet of why we're all here. We're a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. All right, the next item on the agenda is oral communications from the public. Members of the public, the meeting host muted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so either by raising your hand on your video call or using the raise hand option on the participant screen. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you have finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. And we're just going to quickly read aloud the oral communication statement from the agenda for those of you who don't have it in front of you. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes unless extended at the discretion of the chairperson. So with that said, I will open up to anyone who wants to speak during public comment. I see Dan Emerson. Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very good, thank you. I wanted to start by recognizing and thanking both the school committee as well as the school administration and educators. It's been really comforting to see everyone working together, providing an effective learning environment for our children. We really do appreciate the transparency in the decision making as well as the willingness to reevaluate based on changing conditions. I wanted to share with the committee that remote learning is working. Our teachers are providing an engaging educational experience. We're making the best of this challenging situation. They're doing a great job fostering social contact through the remote learning, and we should recognize the hard work that the teachers are putting in. And against the odds, they've made this remote learning work. As we plan for the rest of the school year, I want to make sure we are staying focused on safety, making sure that we're taking care of our children as well as our community, including the teachers working throughout the district. As the numbers have slowly started to tick up, we should be mindful that things have remained safe because of the effort that everybody, like you all, have put in. But we don't put away our umbrellas in the middle of a rainstorm. Based on what we've heard from parents in other districts, the remote and in-person education delivered at the same time has been really challenging, and other districts didn't give themselves the same time to prepare that you all made for our educators. Our concern is that if we do charge ahead with the modified hybrid plan that was shared recently, we feel like we're giving up the effective program that we've settled into over the last couple of weeks. The in-person attention would certainly be good for the kids, but our students on the remote days will have a whole bunch of attendance checks with a few assignments in between to fill some time. I feel like that'll be frustrating for the students as well as the families who are tethered to their laptops without the flexibility that they got from the spring's asynchronous menu when you could change things up and the parents had some control over those school days. I feel like we'd be giving up a working system that you all have put all this work into while increasing the risk for everyone involved, at the same time compromising the academics by having those much more passive interaction days. I do think we should strongly consider sticking with the so far proven remote learning plan, which provides an engaging education every day of the school week, until we're confident that we can offer something that is both safe and is better academically for our students. I just wanted to thank you all for the consideration and all the work you've put in.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else that wants to address the committee during public comments? I'm gonna do the quick scroll through video screens.
See. Oh, we have Sarah Harrington.
Yep, Sarah.
Hi, I'm currently a senior at Triton, and after seeing the plan yesterday that was released, including the asynchronous learning on our days off, I'm asking that committee very thoughtfully vote, and hopefully right now it looks as though while remote is difficult, hybrid's going to be even harder, especially with trying to learn for kids that need more motivation. So I'm asking that you guys please try to vote remote. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Lori?
Hi, I want to as well thank the school committee and the administrators and the faculty. I cannot say how fabulous the first 2 weeks of school have been. What a just pleasant surprise. I have to agree with Dan and Sarah that going from essentially 4.5 days of direct instruction with teachers to the hybrid model where at best the kids are going to have 2.5 days of instruction is really concerning. More than anything, my daughter wants to go to school, but to have that number of days reduced with direct instruction is extremely concerning for me and for my family. So I hope you will consider, when you do make the change, if you decide to vote that in tonight, how to increase the direct instruction for students, because the current plan brings the direct instruction down to 2.5 days. And for students that might be kids that just need more direct instructions, or kids on a 504 plan or an IEP, those kids, those times when they have to just keep going on and doing attendance all day long And essentially, you can call it asynchronous learning, but essentially it's homework for all those other days. That will be a huge challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to address the committee? Going for hands.
Let's see. Oh, Michael
Michael?
Rossi.
Hello, thank you everyone for your efforts and for the entire community for joining this meeting. Quick, my largest concern and what I would love to hear details in your presentation this evening is what exactly the in-person remote, the in-person hybrid days would look like. It would be advantageous and useful to the parents and families this evening if we had specifics of what that would look like. If it's really just a replica of sitting in front of a screen like we're doing at home, that raises a concern and I'm not sure what the gain is. So whatever specifics can be offered would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to address the committee? All right, seeing none, we are going to move on with our agenda then. The next item is reopening of schools, update and further discussion, and I am going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Narissa. So I guess the question is, I know we have all the health agents and nurses and public health nurses with us. I guess checking in on the order, and does it make sense to actually take up not the action item, i.e. the vote, but as far as the metrics and the piece that they are here to speak to, if we take that, because I think the other discussions probably could take a while as we get into the hybrid model and all the other pieces.
Absolutely. I never want to take up anyone's time more than we have to, especially when they're as busy as I'm sure they are. So I would say if you want to take those out of order, that's totally fine with me. And I'm assuming the committee would also agree. I'm seeing nods, so go for it. So I guess this is really, I think the question is the metric, and I think this is more your discussion than mine to lead per se. I mean, I'm happy to, I think one of the items that is under the update that certainly relates to the reopening from a health perspective is the fact that obviously we did communicate publicly that we had a case in the athletics community at the middle school, high school campus. That we're still working through the process of how this works in regards to how we notify, what we notify. Big debate over the last 2 days as cases have begun to tick up, watching superintendents and school committees try and figure out what is the right amount of information. There are boards of health that say the only communication is directly with the individuals who are impacted. There seems to be a larger Department of Public Health, DESE, school of thought where we have to notify the larger community. Obviously no identifying information or details that would identify the individual, but we do need to let the broader community know when a school or a school community is impacted. So that was, one piece of updated information that certainly when we last met was not on the radar. That information did go out over the weekend based on information that was reported to us. So I think that certainly bears. I know Narissa, we were talking before the meeting, the state's updated data was released earlier today. So I'm not quite sure is this discussion wrapped around the metric, or are there certain things that we want to just go right into the metric and have the health agents answer questions, or? So I think my preference would be if we're going to take these out of order, then we move the metric on the testing site to later, since that's not something that necessarily directly affect the health departments. And I know that Deb Rogers from the Newbury Health Director has actually been working on contact tracing. So I'm hoping Deb can give us a quick update on that.
Yes. Hi,
I've lost
everybody.
Deb. There she is.
Thanks,
Hi,
Deb.
Deb.
There
How
I
you
am.
doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Okay,
Thank you
so
for coming tonight.
thank you. So yeah, so we got a great outcome on people contacting the health department on contact tracing, and myself and Frank from Raleigh and Jack from Salisbury, we met up and went through the list, and we're kind of determining based on the availability of, whether somebody works full time or not and what they could give to us. if we needed, these contact tracers and the availability that they would have on a weekly basis. And so from there, what we did was we kind of checked off some of the potential contact tracers that we could get lined up so that when we have future cases with students or faculty or anyone related to the school department, between the 3 towns, we could, use these contact tracers to follow the MAVEN, which is our state epidemiologist MAVEN website, where they log in and follow the protocols of seeing who needs to be quarantined, isolated, and who was in direct contact, and they note everything and go from there and contact any party that needs it. And so what happens is at this time, what we did was we actually have right now have hired we're calling her, let's see, she's going to be our contact tracing liaison coordinator. And what she'll do is getting her on board. I just got her a public health email, because you have to have a government email to be able to access the state MAVEN. So we got her all set up on that. She signed up to take the course on Monday, and then she'll be the coordinator. And from there, she's already reached out to other individuals on these contact tracers that she'll work and coordinate with it. And then from there, we will keep working on logistics of it with the school nurse, with Tara O'Keefe, who's been great, with my public health nurse in Raleigh's, in Salisbury's, and they'll all work and coordinate and figure out exactly the best way to designate and coordinate so that we're not recreating confusion where we have like one person designated to each MAVEN case and go from there. And so we'll be working with the schools very directly and everything. And at this time, we've started the process. So we're getting there, and we're hoping by next week, once she's fully trained, again, we can all meet and go from there on getting 5 to 6 others on board and have them ready to go, so that when we do get a positive case in any one of these communities, that we'll be working together at close call to make sure that we're isolating and quarantining the correct people that may have had a potential exposure.
And can I ask a question? So this coordinator is, we're dedicated to the school specifically, or will
yes,
she also have a role in the town? Okay. So this person becomes the point of contact for Tara O'Keefe, who I saw bopping around the screens, as our district lead nurse, becomes the point of contact as a single point of contact. And then she will coordinate with, obviously, especially at the middle school and high school, dealing with 3 towns, will coordinate with each town as appropriate.
Correct. Okay. So what I did do also was I spoke to my public health nurse today, PM Lara, and because I do the town of Georgetown and Newbury, I said, once she gets all signed up on Monday, whichever town, Newbury or Georgetown, has a case, not a student or a school, but if we just have a case in our town, let's just designate and appoint her to do it. So walk her through and make sure, any glitches and things, and we would still have our regular public health nurses in each individual towns, or state epidemiologists or other resources to help the school or our coordinator or any of our contact tracers to make sure things go smoothly. So I'll have her do any patient that first comes up. Bad bitch, you wanna pick the bomb. So I don't know if you could hear me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So yeah, so basically I figured if we could get her to do, any patient that we have as a case, just kind of what our whole thing is to just kind of be ahead of this game, kind of have our team ready to go, have everybody trained, everybody ready. And again, to, have her do a few, regardless if it's a school or not, residents of Georgetown, Newbury, and get her ready to go. And then again, she'll be in contact fully with Tara, and then the nurses and Tara can work out the exact logistics to make sure that, whoever is assigned to that one specific person sticks with that patient. And that way we don't have like 5 contact tracers all going into the same even case, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Thank you. And I know I saw Jack with his hand up, so I was going to come to him next and then take questions from the committee if you have any. Jack, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and Deb kind of covered it, that this COVID-19 coordinator is strictly for the Triton School District to work with Tara, because a lot of times you're going to get information about a positive case before we even get it through Maven. So we felt it was important to have that link and get started on it, and Tara will be working with the school nurses to immediately start to identify close contacts within a class if that's what happens. And we also talked to Brian about being the lead on if we need to request rapid testing from the Department of Public Health, the Division of Epidemiology. So we've set up that hierarchy, that command chain as well.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Before we go on to questions, I will express my my gratitude on behalf of the committee and the district, because I think it was probably close to a month ago now where we literally just set this out there kind of and said, you know, there are definitely concerns about capacity. What can we do? And obviously you all have pulled this together in what's a relatively short period of time for a fairly complex system that it's turning out to be. So thank you all for your work.
And can we just, Narissa, can we just identify, so Jack is on camera, but so Jack is the public health agent in Salisbury. Frank is the public health agent in Rowley, and Deb is the public health agent in Newbury. So just wanted to make sure folks knew those faces.
Yes, and we also have, I believe, Mary Ellen, who's the public health nurse in Rowley.
Yes.
Pam, I'm not sure if I saw her on the list. She's the public health nurse in Newbury, and Tina is the public health nurse in Salisbury.
I think I saw Tina coming, and I know we have Tara O'Keefe and Nadine Marcheterre and Debbie Blanchette, at least 3 of our nurses on. And I think actually, Tara, did you have a question or something to add?
I did. I just needed clarification, because so now we have a contact coordinator, and all the school nurses in the district are going to come to me with their information regarding a positive COVID test. So once I get the information, I'm going to call Kristen, the coordinator. I just need to know from there if the student lives in Salisbury, Newbury, maybe even Byfield, wherever they live, I go to that public health agent or public health nurse, whichever, and then we go from there, and then they sign a contact tracer. But the nurses will know the immediate kind of obvious close contacts before the Maven system gets involved in all that. What is our process once we identify those kind of obvious close contacts? That's my only question.
So that would have to be through this new coordinator liaison, whatever the full new title is, as it's being developed as we speak. So that becomes, correct me, Deb or Jack or Frank, that becomes Tara's point of contact as the lead nurse. And then that coordinator would coordinate with each of the town health departments so that Tara doesn't have to run to each of the 3 towns.
Okay, so nurses come to me, I go to Kristen, Kristen goes to you. Done. Okay.
Right.
Was that it, Tara? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Questions from the committee. Paul Lees?
I just wanted to know, are we going to hear from each of the town health agents as to the number of cases they've had in the last 2 weeks? Because that's one of our metrics.
Yes. I'm kind of working my way through at least what's relevant to them for right now, and then we'll go back. Linda?
First, I want to thank all the health agents and the nurses for all their time and effort that they've put into this. I have a question that if a student tests positive that is in our district but lives in Newburyport, would they be letting you know that they're at Triton?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead, Jack.
Okay. So normally what should happen is, again, Tara will probably have that information and relay that to Kristen, and Kristen can reach out to Pam in Newburyport, and we can share the case if it's a Newburyport resident. Pam Lombardo is the nurse there, and she has done it already, and she will automatically I think, share the case with us, but I don't think there'll be a lack in communication there.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your question, Linda? Or
Yeah,
do you
it
have a
does.
follow-up?
Yeah, because I'm more concerned with people outside our district that are in our schools that our health agents aren't responsible for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Lees?
Just another follow-up question. With regard to the student that did test positive for COVID, are we going to get a report about how the tracing has gone? Just the process and the effectiveness of it?
I would defer to the superintendent on this one.
I was going to
because
say,
it's very limited.
I was going to say, I think I want to take that away and talk to the health agents because, again, if there are, we have a very good working relationship with we get to have 3 town health departments, and I'm very appreciative of the working relationship. There are many town health departments that won't even allow a school to notify the whole school population other than those who were designated close contacts. So I guess my default answer would be, I don't believe we can. However, I'll take that away as something that we'll circle back and get a little more clarity to make sure that we are on the right side of the law in regard to what we can and cannot share.
A little touchy as far as HIPAA, from
So,
my understanding.
Ryan, my question was geared towards not any of the specifics, but just how the tracing has gone. And I don't really see how that could be protected information. Just how effective the tracing has gone, how the volunteers have worked, how that's all gone.
Oh, gotcha. So is it not as a specific case, but as a general rule, how the tracing is working? Absolutely. I think, okay. I think we can provide that.
Any other questions from the committee on contact tracing? So Deb, I'm going to put the kind of $1 million question to you on this one. Are you comfortable with the town's capacity, and this can be a Jack and Frank question too, are you comfortable with the town's capacity to handle contact tracing if the schools opened further, either to a hybrid model or even eventually in the much longer distance into a full in-person model?
I can speak to that. And at this time, I think I'm confident that we're have a liaison getting on board as of taking the training on Monday. And again, we're going to try it. You know, she is fully for the Triton Regional, but I figured if we get a case in between that isn't school related, let's just get her on it. And she's very competent. I feel very strongly that she'll work right with Tara and the rest of the public health nurses to stay on board and organize. I guess the good thing is that, you know, the numbers haven't, you know, they are increasing, but they're not crazy enough that it's, as we go, we may be ironing out some things, and Tara may say that this isn't working for the school and this is better for us. And, you know, like I said, as we go, we might be ironing out a little bit of the logistics, but I do feel comfortable that we're definitely headed that way.
Okay, thank you. Jack or Frank, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I would echo Deb's comments. I'm comfortable. I think I'm comfortable with the protocol we have set up. And as Brian said, we have a very good working relationship with him and Tara. And lines of communication are open. And I think we're ready to, God forbid, but I think we're ready to handle any situation and move forward confidently.
All right, thanks, Jack. Frank, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little quiet, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I agree with what Jack and Devin said. Before we got the coordinator in place, I was a little concerned, but now that she is in place and we're getting up to speed, much more comfortable. I think it's important to have that one person because the town nurses are going to be consumed with their own town and other cases and other issues. So having her in place was a big step, and I agree.
Absolutely. All right, thank you very much. So wrapping up contact tracing, that would move us on to the number of cases within the towns within the last 2 weeks. So I have the state data that came out, but I'm always curious because I understand that sometimes the state data doesn't always match the town data. So I know that the state data that came out earlier tonight said that there were 12 cases across the 3 towns. Within the last 2 weeks. Does that match the information that you have locally?
Hello.
Hi, Mary Ellen. How are you?
Hi. You know, Rowley looks like it's climbed. We're at 5, but when you break it down, we've had college students come home to isolate at home. We've had one that's actually been out in a university and isolated out there, but because he gave the address of Rowley as his home address, we got the case. So it's not as bad as it looks. I only have actually 1 active case on the books now, so we're really doing well. And our overall count of 73, we are dealing also with a nursing home that had an outbreak. So that brings our numbers up to start with. So other than that, there's been no contacts that have actually occurred within the town.
Okay.
They're all from their jobs and other places, so.
Perfect, thank you. And I should say Mary Ellen is the public health nurse for Rowley. So I turn to Newbury or Salisbury and see if again, the state data is matching what you're seeing as well.
I'll ask Tina to answer for Salisbury. She's monitors it daily. I know we had a climb about 4 or 5 over the last couple of weeks. 2 of them, I believe, were families of 2, but I'll defer to Tina if she has that information right in front of her.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's Tina, I see her.
Hi there. Yes, I do. Actively in Salisbury right now, there's 4 cases.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Deb, or I don't know if Pam's on the call.
Yeah, before we move on, we were looking also for the metric for the 2-week time frame.
Oh, okay. So so for Newbury, we're in the gray right now. As of today, we're still in the gray. We have 2 active cases right now in the past 2 weeks. We've had a total since March altogether 22. Our numbers here in Newbury have been nice and low, so we've really lucked out that way.
All right, terrific, thank you. And I guess we can move on, ask if there are any questions from the committee before we go on to asking about the school metric. All right, seeing none, I guess I would put the same question to you. Obviously, we had 1 cases in the schools. Are you aware of any other cases that have been for students or staff from the school district that would have been here? Sounds like Jack was going to answer first.
So we're not aware of any other cases except this 1 case that developed over the weekend.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Deb?
Yeah, same here. We had the 2 cases there, and those were done on September 21st. So we've had no new case on September 21st.
Okay, and those were not anything to do with the anyone who would have been in our schools, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. And Mary Ellen, I don't believe none from Raleigh. All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So, go ahead. Did somebody want to add something? No.
Mary Ellen just said you're welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mary Ellen. Sorry, I was flipping back to the metric. So I think that is everything that would involve the health agents and public health nurses, unless you have anything else, Brian, and the school nurses as well, unless you had anything else that you wanted to bring up.
Just looking on the metric. I don't believe so.
Question.
I was gonna say, I was wondering if the nurses had any questions.
I do.
Hi, Nadine.
Nadine.
Hi. If we're aware of a close contact that is reported to us, is that something that you would want reported? Like a student or a staff member is a close contact?
Is that, you mean reported to me or reported to the town?
No, reported to the nurses. Like if a staff member is out quarantined for 14 days because they're a close contact, or a student is out because they're a close contact.
So the question is for the public health nurses, is that information that they would want, correct?
Right.
It should go to Tara, and Tara should go to the coordinator, and the coordinator will go to the responsible public health nurse, whichever community, so that we can keep the chain of command in place. Rather than directly communicating with the nurses, we can track this information and categorize it.
Because I have a number of those.
Perfect. So it sounds like Kristen will be on board soon and be able to help out with that whole process too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Linda?
Yes, I just had a question that if the health agents are notified that a person is considered positive, do they then speak to the person to see whether they have students in the district?
I mean, I guess, so they're going to do contact tracing. I guess someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is they're going to do contact tracing, but unless the case is someone actually in the district, we would take no further action at that point. That close, if there was a close contact, right, then they would stay home and isolate and not be in our buildings. Is that, I defer to Deb or Mary Ellen?
Okay, so I'm not really understanding the question. So you're saying if somebody is a close contact that isn't in your district, is that what you're?
No, like if a person, say, goes to Interjakes, they test positive. I'm sure if they're from Salisbury, they'll contact the Salisbury Department of Health. Does the Department of Health then reach out to that person to see if they have any students that attend Triton? So whether that student tests positive or not, whether that student would be allowed to go back to school if their parent is positive.
So that is what the contact tracing is. So if a patient at any patient that tests positive, that whichever, no matter where they're from, when whatever town public health nurse contacts that patient that's positive, that's when they do the interview to determine if there's any close contacts. And if there was a student one, then yes, that's when we would make sure that between the coordinator and Tara, and that there was a close contact to a student from a positive case. So if that helps your question.
Yeah, it does. I just want to make sure that we all understand how the contact tracing works. If it's not somebody, a student, that it winds up being an adult that is not a staff member.
Yeah, so any direct positive case, and if once they do the interview on them, once any of the contact tracers or public health nurse does the interview, they'll determine if that person, whether it be a household member with somebody in a positive, that's positive in the case and live there, then they would be considered, they'd have to isolate, and they would be considered, exposed. Or if they were with somebody that was positive within more than 15 minutes within the 6 feet distance. So that's the whole idea of the contact tracing, to determine, interview, and see who needs to be quarantined and isolated.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I was gonna say, just, it's important to note in all of that, and I believe it was Jack who said it earlier, perhaps Deb, town health agents and nurses are reliant on the state system, MAVEN. So there's no magic that happens from the time of the test to the time that shows up in the MAVEN system. So ideally, it's going to be the parent, or if a student is 18 and older, it's going to be the parent who knows the soonest, and incumbent on the parent to let us know, because we the Tara, the town or the school nurses, are far and away more likely to be informing the public health nurses and agents, and perhaps the new coordinator, of a case if parents are doing their job and telling us when a student is diagnosed. So we can't say that enough, that through all of this, the state system is reliant on a large and massive system. And so our first and best line of defense is when a family gets a diagnosis, being honest and forthright and coming right in and telling the school nurse so that we can start our procedures and protocols.
That is correct. Yes.
All right, I see a couple of them questions from committee members. Paul Mayette.
I just wanted to ask of the public health nurses, I know that DESE's guidance for what would be considered a close contact within the classroom has wavered over time. What would you consider to be a close contact if a student was positive? Would it be if they were seated 6 feet from anyone else, then would that be the case that nobody in that classroom would be considered a close contact for your purposes, as far as that goes?
So the Newbury public health nurse is not on, so I don't know if the other public health nurses want to speak to it, but the way I interpret it is, so there's a little bit of a glitch in the system as far as DESE's guidelines versus the public health guidelines. So if you're, for us, it's different. We're taught that if you're within that 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, then you're considered, that you could have exposure if there's potential exposure there. So DESE's guidelines are so different that it becomes a little complicated on which guidelines, you're supposed to follow. And I'll let one of the public health nurses, if they want, talk more about it. But there's definitely a little bit of a glitch in the way we contact under the MAVEN versus what DESE and the schools have to consider for exposure.
Yeah.
Hi, what Deb said is true. I think it would depend on your liaison at that point to go with what the school has if it's a student. Your guidelines will be a little different from if we're out in the community looking for a quarantine or an isolation person,
Yeah, if it's a student case, we'll have to follow the DESE guidance, which is entirely different, not entirely, but as Deb mentioned, there's a disconnect between the DESE guidance and the Department of Public Health guidance, and DPH has made it very clear to health agents during our conference calls that they are not going to supersede or supplement the DESE guidance because they are working with them to develop their guidance. So when it comes to the school district, we'll have to use the DESE guidance.
All right. Thank you, Jack. Did that answer the question, Paul? Matt?
I guess I'm still not even looking at the DESE guidance entirely clear. So you've got, they say you'd have to be within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. So I'm looking at, so I teach in another district. My classroom, there are 6 feet between every student. If I had one student within my class that was positive, nobody should be within 6 feet of that student. Under the DESE guidelines, there would be no close contacts. Am I correct in that? I just want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
Paul,
Yes.
I'm looking for it. I thought I'm going through the original documents. I thought it said that it was that cohort thing and that everybody in the room was considered close contact, but I'm having trouble
It's at the
with
elementary
the
level.
exact statement.
So that's at
elementary.
That's
I
at
think
the
it was
elementary
the whole
level.
entire class had to then go and
in quarantine, because that was actually guidance that DESE originally had in place. DPH didn't jive with that, and so it then changed, and later on the guidance was clarified and that was removed, and we chose to leave that in place in our guidelines, that because of the nature of an elementary class being a single cohort that largely stays together, and unfortunately in the same room for 6.5 hours a day in the current scenario, that in that case, those students would all be considered a close contact if a student was diagnosed or a staff member was diagnosed from that classroom. At the middle school and high school level, the way our plan is written, it mirrors the guidelines to say it's the 6 feet sustained. I will say one of the further clarifications, and I know we've been reaching out directly to the state epidemiology or director or department or whatever that is. And there's a different interpretation of the sustained contact, that it's not a one individual period of time, and I apologize, I disappeared for 90 seconds, and if this was already discussed, it's not an individual, right? I come in, I sit next to you, Paul, and I'm with you for 16 minutes, and I'm within 6 feet there, the close contact happened. If I spend 2 minutes with you, and then 2 minutes with you, and then 2 minutes with you, it's the collective that is in determined close contact. And so it's the collective amount of time you've spent with someone within that 6 feet over the course of a single day. That's the way it's been described. I see Tara nodding and Nadine. That's the way it's been described most recently.
Yeah, that's the state clarified that on one of our conference calls. They're looking at an accumulative effect, and you're absolutely right, Brian. So during the course of the day, if you're sitting with somebody for 5 minutes and then you leave for an hour and come back for another 5 minutes, whatever it is during the course of the day, if it adds up to that 15-minute period, you'll be considered close contact.
Okay. Thanks for confirming that, Jack. And that obviously that came about when anytime we're talking about specifically athletics, obviously with that situation over the last week, where it's the discussion about if someone's running up and down a field, is it sitting next to them on the bench, or can it be that you're with someone for a minute and a half, and then a minute and a half, and a minute, and all of that? And that was where that came from. So I think that's a very important thing that's been distinguished and clarified, because that changes the understanding pretty drastically. As obviously, you, Paul, in your classroom, you come into contact differently at different times with students, but the collective versus a sustained 15 minutes is a very different standard.
Thank you.
Elise?
Yeah, Brian, I just had a question. I know you're talking about athletics and reporting and how important that is. My son didn't play a fall sport this year. Typically, the sign-up sheet for the athletics and the parents have to sign that as well. Is there any specific COVID reporting language on that parent sign-up sheet?
Do you say COVID reporting?
Yeah. So if a student athlete tests positive, are the parents signing up for the need to immediately report to the school?
So I know there is a waiver that was added. I don't know if that specific language requires the reporting, but student athletes are required to complete a daily health screen. And it's actually it's an app that Mr. Alberts put in place. And so literally it's a system where every day, if the student hasn't checked in, and they have to complete it's very typical. If you go to the doctor, if you go somewhere, you haven't been with anyone in the last 14 days, you don't have a fever, any of these symptoms. So that is done, but I can check, but I'm not sure if that waiver, it was a new waiver added this year, but I don't know if it specifically calls out the reporting requirement. So I can check on that.
Can you touch base with the AD and just see if other communities are using that or stressing that? Because I think obviously you've hit the nail on the head that the reporting is critical.
Yep. To
get an early jump on the tracing and everything else.
Anything else, Paul? Was that it?
Well, thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for Erin, go ahead.
I just want to let you know I don't have the raise hand function. For some reason, I don't have it on this computer, so I have to do it physically. I want to just double check to make sure that my understanding is accurate. So when you're doing the contact tracing and you have identified a close contact, and that close contact is either a student or a staff member at the school, our nurses at the schools are being notified that that person should be quarantining.
I see nodding.
So that is correct. And so I assume, and I'm sure Jack and Frank will agree, but so what should happen is once we get the coordinator fully on board next week, we should hold a meeting again with Tara and possibly the other public health nurses and really get that part of the logistics to make sure that nothing is getting, so everything is getting reported where it should, and have a protocol, and maybe have our coordinator create something so that, it's designated areas and that each individual town, depending what town it's in and which person will be able to make sure it gets reached out to all of them. And going back to what Brian said too, it is absolutely important, I think, if we can emphasize to everybody, whether it be parents, faculty, or whatever, absolutely, if somebody gets a positive case, it's really important if they would call either the school nurse or us as a public health nurse and say that they received this, because, and Jack and Frank can vouch for this, but throughout these, and Mary Ellen too, but as far as the last 8 months go, us, even ourselves, word of the street, somebody will call us and say, you know, I was positive today, and it can take sometimes 24, 48 hours before it's even in the Maven that notifies our public health nurse that there's a positive case, and we could be absolutely working on this ahead of time. So it's really important if everybody can do their part in it and let us know that there was a positive case.
Nadine, go ahead.
That's what happened as of this weekend. We did get a report, and I'm just wondering, with the public health officials, are you able to take calls over the weekend? Because that did come in this weekend, and we did act on it, and I'm wondering, will that be something that we would be able to get help from the public health officials over the weekend?
So I myself, I'm available 24/7. I mean, the last 8 months, I keep saying to everybody, I mean, COVID doesn't seem to care if it's a weekend or a Friday or whatever. So, I mean, I'm available myself. And again, this coordinator that we're hiring, well, she is available 24/7, and that is part of her job. So I would assume that we'll have everybody reach out to her, and then she can screen and determine who needs to be reached. And she can use myself or Pam Lara at any time that she needs for, you know, additional. I know ourselves, last Saturday, we actually had a case in my other town, and we had to call the state epidemiologist on it, and they were all available on Saturday too. So it's good to know that, you know, these cases would obviously be taken care of no matter what day it is. And between all 3 communities and towns, I mean, we would all work together and be available. So if for some reason Jack or Frank wasn't available in Salisbury or Raleigh, you know, it doesn't have to 100% stay in that town. They can obviously call us, and we would guide and help in any way we could too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to say that's a huge benefit of the single point of contact with the coordinator. And I think that's when it's Tara with our nurses coordinating for the district, and then to have one point of contact is a significant, and I'm not sure we said this, but thank you to the 3 towns for committing to funding this additional position, because this was a new position. It will be a tremendous, I think, you know, as the way it happened over last weekend compared to how we know it will go in the future, I think is reassuring.
I just want to reiterate, Brian, that I think, and Deb and Frank as well, I mean, I'm sure they'll say the same. Deb just did. We are available 24/7. In fact, I talked to Brian Sunday afternoon on this most recent case. So, however, sometimes I get a bad signal or my phone's dead because it never shuts off. But anyways, we're usually available.
Thanks, Jack.
I agree with Jack. We talked on Sunday also, Brian, and we're available. And again, having that coordinator, like Deb was saying, is key. So she will get to the right people as she needs to.
Thanks, Frank.
Perfect. All right. Any other questions for our the health agents or the public health nurses or the school nurses before we let them go? If they want to. You guys are all welcome to stay if you want to hang around too. I'm sure you have other things to do tonight. All right, seeing none, I very much appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for going beyond, you know, regular business hours. I know when you say 24/7, you know, this is within 24/7, but it's still above and beyond. So thank you very much to Deb and Frank and Jack, and to Mary Ellen, Tina, and Pam, and to our, I don't know how many of them are on, but our school nurses who are on here, Nadine and Tara, and I know I saw Debbie. I'm not sure about anybody else, but thank you very much for taking the time to come on tonight so that we can have these discussions.
Thank
you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Get it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Jack.
Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
All right. So Brian, I'm going to move back to the beginning of the metric and go to the testing site. So either you can give an update on that, or I can give an update on that. It's up to you.
Sorry, I was talking and I was muted. So I will start, and then if there's more information that you have, we have continued to keep our contact with Anna Jakes and Gary Lee. He has confirmed that as of recently, Quest Labs, and he has proven this out through the tent there at Anna Jakes, that their turnaround time is 48 to 72 hours currently, so 2 to 3 days. There hasn't been any change since last week. That was the case last week. And as of earlier this week, or yesterday rather, that was still the case. They are, I know it's too soon to ring the bells yet, but I do know that the Governor's Academy and the Newburyport Public Schools also reached out to them directly. So Triton, Newburyport, and Governors are all working with them. And there is, remember we got back to the discussion about Anna Jakes they take insurance, they take Mass Health. So in essence, it's free. The turnaround time is now 48 to 72 hours. You said 48 hours. There is a 48 in that. So I don't know if you want to consider that checking the box. The other piece was free. The other piece was the timeliness of the testing. So there's the turnaround time on the testing, but there's also the getting the student or staff member tested. So I can't share details because this is not something that's in play yet, but they are working on an effort that would get away from the requirement to have the standing or to have the order from the doctor, the referral that's required currently. So I will just say they are being incredibly creative in attempting to find a way that we would be able to send students or staff directly to Anna Jakes to be able to get tested. So not ready to say that's a victory yet, but I'm super appreciative for Anna Jakes and Gary and all the work they're doing to try and make this a reality. But their turnaround times are now 48 to 72 hours.
Thank you, Brian. And just to confirm, they're basically pushing, I don't want to say pushing, but directing all cases out of the ER and into the drive-through, as far as I know. So they operate for anyone who doesn't know, they operate a drive-through testing. It's actually in the parking lot. So rather than having initially, there were a lot of cases where apparently minors were being referred by like a pediatrician, and that referral was going through the emergency room, which is obviously not ideal. And those are now going through the drive-in or drive-through, not drive-in.
I was referring to it as the tent. So that's what that was. The tent,
yes, exactly. So that's the update on that. That takes us down to the risk assessment on the facilities.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pass that over, and actually that was included on the agenda as a separate annex. I believe that we had that with the agenda, right? And we actually had that ready on Monday. So I'm actually going to pass that over to Kyle and share that information. Ask him to share that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So the memo that's included in the agenda, it had a quick summary of the background on the process we went through starting in the early summer of analyzing our HVAC systems, consulting with industry experts, as well as the mechanical maintenance providers on the systems we have in each of our school buildings. In meeting with them, they had noted that the best way to mitigate the airborne risks associated with COVID-19 is to increase filtration and increase airflow. So regarding the increased filtration, we purchased MERV 11 filters, they're called. So they're enhanced filtration from the filters that we previously had. There had been a lot of discussion around the Commonwealth about which filters to use. Should you use the best, the most filtration? But in the systems we have, in meeting with those experts as well as our mechanical maintenance providers, they suggested the MERV 11 because it provides the best balance of filtration, but not overly restricting airflow. So we've purchased those, we've received those, and they've been installed. I think just about all of the areas, or they're being installed right now. Regarding the airflow, we contracted with an independent engineering firm to assess every single room of every single of each of the school buildings of our campus. So that metering project went on throughout the course of August, where the company came in and they have this little hood vent and they put it up to the HVAC system and they measure the air exchange per hour in each of those rooms. And the industry standard, or the minimum safe level, is 4 exchanges per hour. So that was our goal in each of the rooms of each school building. Like I mentioned, they finished up their initial metering at the end of August and provided us with the results shortly thereafter. Immediately we went to task of correcting any identified issues. In the memo there, outlined for each of the school buildings. I think at the middle school, high school, there were 293 rooms tested. Salisbury Elementary, 122 rooms tested. Newbury Elementary, 92. And then actually at Pine Grove School, that was excluded from the scope of this engagement because being a brand new facility, we actually had a report in hand where independent firms certified that all of those HVAC systems at Pine Grove were at spec regarding airflow. So with each of the deficiencies, we had worked on those over the course of this month, contracting with our outside vendors, a variety of issues where there may have been some deferred maintenance, cleaning the items, or some repairs that may have just happened. So we have now completed all of those repairs. We have remetered a sample of the rooms. Our goal is, or we will be remetering all of the learning spaces. That's set to be completed this coming Monday and Tuesday, the 5th and 6th. Unfortunately, because of a scheduling snafu with the company where everybody else in the state is doing the same thing. We weren't able to have that fully completed last week, but in the sample that's been remetered, we've been very encouraged by the results. As I included there, I think over at the middle school, high school campus, 34 of the rooms remetered, 30 are now have air exchange above 4. The four room differential there, a couple of them actually aren't learning spaces. They're offices or storage rooms. There is one learning space where we're revisiting that. And this will be the process for any rooms that are still below that 4 air exchange per hour. We'll be getting on that immediately and seeing what can be rectified in working with our mechanical maintenance provider, or if it's simply a design issue where maybe the HVAC system isn't large enough for a particular space. In that case, we'll purchase a portable HEPA filter, which I think a lot of people are probably familiar with because we've been hearing about other districts purchasing them around the state. So we put those in any room where the air exchange, any learning space where the air exchange is still below 4. However, given the results we're experiencing right now, 30 of the 34 remeter at the middle school, high school are now above 4. 16 of the 17 remetered at Salisbury Elementary are now above the 4 air exchange. Newbury Elementary, 7 of the 7 we remetered are above the 4 exchange. So very promising results. Thank you again to Chris Walsh, our facilities director, as well as all the custodians for the incredible amount of work they've done in a short time period. It's certainly been a valiant effort to get these rooms and spaces in a good standing from an HVAC perspective.
So can I just wrap around and thank you to Kyle, who has done this for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, since August, as he was literally sitting there waiting for that report to come in. So it has been a tremendous effort for a lot of people to make sure this happens. So the only other thing that Kyle didn't mention is Pine Grove School, obviously brand new, certified back in February. Didn't spend any money recertifying those systems because we have all the reports, and we would all be jealous of the systems that are in place over at Pine Grove currently. So, any questions on that?
Linda has a question.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody who's put in all that effort as well. I know that a lot of discussion has been had about when you move indoors that you have to maximize as much airflow as you can. In reading your memorandum here, Kyle, on page 1 on the bottom, it says that classroom windows will remain open to bring extra outside air into the classroom for as long as possible, except when extreme weather prevents us from doing so. I think we've had this discussion, and I had asked if it was really cold outside, whether it's on the bus or whatever, the windows would remain open to make sure that there was airflow in there. And now in your memorandum, it says when it's possible. Could you please, clarify what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So in meeting with the industry professionals and chatting with the mechanical providers, the maintaining an air exchange rate of 4 or above is sufficient to mitigate these airborne risks, the airborne risks associated with COVID. The opening of the windows is an added layer of safety, so it enhances the overall airflow. So that's why we want to keep it there as much as possible within the constraints of extreme weather. Certainly, what was it, last week we had it was very chilly outside, a little colder than we would have expected in February, although I think that happens not totally unusual, but we had to crank up the heat a little earlier than we wanted to.
We turned the heat on in September. We've never turned the heat on in September. Brian doesn't allow the heat on in September, but the heat got turned on.
We had a meeting. But to answer your question specifically, it's an added layer of airflow, but the systems, as long as they meet that 4 air exchange an hour.
And can I add that that's also been a topic of discussion with the buses. So same thing. Again, the buses obviously are don't have the same HVAC systems. There is heat and all that, but on the buses it's definitely more important. But it's not as we get into the winter and on those chilly mornings, it doesn't have to be every single window on both sides of the bus all the way down. Versus maybe it's every third window on either side of the bus, and it still allows that air to be moving through. But as we reviewed that, and certainly these guidelines were written for buildings across the state, and there are absolutely many buildings in many districts where there are no HVAC systems. There is heat, but it is not moving air per se. So because they don't have those systems that would be moving air, then the windows are even more important. And they're even going as far as suggesting that you have fans in windows. So you would have fans in one window blowing out and fans in another window bringing air in. And so certainly because of the systems we have in place, we're not as reliant on that. But certainly whenever the weather allows, we will certainly ask folks to keep windows open as long as the rooms aren't getting too cold. Because this is everything that we've done here. We've talked about masks and the assessment for families as they send their students in the morning, and for staff, and for windows open and HVAC. It's a layered approach. It's everything all together that is ultimately going to keep everyone as safe as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
The questions on the ventilation study? So I have just a couple, Kyle. So if there are if there is additional remediation that's required, do we have those HEPA systems that are referred to in the report available already, so we can put those into the classrooms immediately, or is that something that's going to take additional time before those classrooms are usable?
We have a couple on site that are being used, but we have reached out to the vendor and we've been assured that we would have a turnaround time. So certainly the call, depending how this meeting goes, we'll make a call tomorrow to purchase those. And if that purchase was made, we would have them in time. We have been assured of that.
Okay. Yep. Perfect, thank you.
I was going to say we should add that while we do obviously have staff, the majority of staff in the building and high priority students in the building. So any of the spaces that we have, when waiting on remetering, we've, unless we were confident that the fix, like we've talked about, that the majority were fixed, if there are any issues and outstanding, we've not had students and staff in those spaces.
And important to highlight that too is going forward, right? Our aging facilities, the HVAC systems are going to go offline. However, we have, even right now, we have a list of every single space where students are present, or more than one person. And we've been monitoring those rooms to see, okay, if it goes offline, what's our protocols? Shift everybody over into another room and immediately remediate the issue. Just so we're constantly monitoring these and the spaces are safe.
Perfect, thank you. And do we have, we don't have anyone in those rooms that are not satisfactory right now, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Those are my only questions.
Yep.
Anyone else have questions on the ventilation report? Okay, sorry, one more question, Kyle. When are we anticipating having the final report? Because I know that was something we had talked about, hopefully having for this meeting and then releasing to the public. And obviously, you know, with the remetering not happening on time, that's not finished up.
Correct. Yeah. So again, a unexpected scheduling issue there, but they are scheduled to wrap this up on the 5th and 6th. So by October 6th, all that remetering will be completed. And
Yep.
generally it's about a day turnaround time on that.
Okay.
So I'd expect on Thursday, we should have that.
Pretty quickly then.
Yep.
And I was going to say the final full written report, and again, it's not going to be an 80-page narrative, but the final full report from Airdyne may not be ready for Tuesday, but we will know of any deficient systems so that I can confidently, and Kyle can confirm that I'm not lying, we can confidently say to you that we will be prepared on the 13th. And if there was anything that was to change, we will know that by next week.
Okay.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kyle, for all the work that you've put into this project, because I know it has been, for someone who said in the beginning, I've never really dealt with HVAC systems before, you come out with terms like MERV and things like that pretty readily now and seem to have a great working knowledge. So don't develop a second career, okay?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a learning experience.
Keep you where you are.
Thank you.
But thank you for the intensity that you brought to that project, because I know it is obviously far more than a lot of other districts have done, and it has been an intensive piece of work on your part. So
good group effort by all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, that would take us back to that section. So the update on reopening in athletics.
So I think that nothing has changed since we last met. Obviously, we are meeting in person for high priority students only. Other than that, it is the majority of our students are learning remotely. I will say there's been a lot of conversations over the last 2 weeks with families. I've spoken to many families and students who have been, I will say, pleasantly surprised at how effective remote learning has been. There have certainly been challenges over the 2 weeks. There have been technology challenges. Newbury seemed to have gotten the brunt of the technology challenges. Our network administrator, Brett Buckus, I think left after taking the network down last Friday night, left there at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday so he could do some fixes in off hours. And so continuing to chase gremlins here and there on the systems. But by and large, we've heard very favorable reports from folks who have been learning remotely. Certainly, learning remotely is far more challenging at the primary grades than it is at the secondary level. I think on the spectrum of pre-K through grade 12, the comfort and effectiveness of learning remotely certainly grows from the youngest students on up through the oldest. So other than that, I don't think there's any general updates. The two key things that we have been working on are what our hybrid model will look like, and then from that, what our remote option will look like. So it probably makes sense to talk about what was sent out to families, and I believe that was yesterday. If not, I believe it was yesterday afternoon. There's been several updates, and one more right before this meeting with a full-time remote option. But the model that was sent out yesterday was different than what we produced in August. When we produced the final plan on August 12th, that plan was the result of weeks and weeks, the entire summer. There was a large working group that we referred to several times of 60 plus individuals, and countless other discussions with educators and families and administrators to arrive at what we thought was the best plan. The plan that we put out now 7 weeks ago today on August 12th was a bit lofty in both what we could provide for a hybrid model and what we could provide for the remote option. So I know there have been folks who have thought that we were dishonest, and I apologize if this comes across as dishonest or disingenuous in any way, but there was nothing but pure intent when that plan was put together. But as we have gone through this process, we have watched other districts. Some of us have experienced as parents in other districts, or folks, educators who have friends who are educators in other districts, or parents in other districts, and watched those that have moved into hybrid and have had the benefit of being able to see what does and what does not work. And so as we started to unpack our hybrid plans, the significant difference by and large is the fact that the 2 at-home remote days, aside from Monday, the significant difference is that those will largely be asynchronous days. When we had put the sample schedule out again on August 12th, we anticipated more synchronous learning. Through all of our discussions with educators, with administrators, again, with other districts where this is occurring, it became clear that what we have heard, and we heard this from the student perspective as well as from the educator perspective, is that teachers can't be in 2 places at the same time and do it well. So if you are attempting to teach your students who are in front of you, and also to simultaneously teach the students who are at home, that degrades the educational experience that everyone receives, those students in the classroom and those students at home. The caveat is there is certainly content or subject areas or ages where that might be more appropriate. And so certainly that doesn't mean that there won't be times when an educator decides that this lesson, this content, this topic is appropriate to spend some time and is able to stream live from the classroom. And that's as effective for the student sitting in front of her or him, as well as the student sitting at home remotely. But by and large, the assumption is that those at-home days are asynchronous. Students will still follow the same schedule. There'll be slight tweaks to the schedule, mostly to accommodate the fact that students are in the building and at home at the middle school and high school level, and at the elementary level. The adjustment will be because Tuesday through Friday, with students back in the building, we have to have rotating lunches, so it goes back to the blocks adjust slightly, but the same structure of a day remains intact. And so when students are home, they will be expected to still maintain that same schedule. So at the beginning of each block or period at the middle school and the high school, teachers will open up the day or open up that period live synchronously with the students in the classroom and the students at home. Again, there may be times when a lesson is actually broadcast simultaneously and synchronously live, but primarily the expectation is that the teacher who's in the classroom is going to spend the majority of that 90-minute block with the students in the classroom, and the students at home, the teacher would check in, technically take attendance, send those students on their way to do their work. And on the converse, the next day, those students who are at home would get the undivided attention of the educator that's in the classroom. So that would happen for each block at the middle school and high school. At the elementary level, there aren't periods, obviously. So certainly the day starts with the opening connections, and the plan is that would be a synchronous activity, and that would likely move into that first learning block. So that would allow students and teachers to be engaged live for the morning and opening meeting, morning meeting, and then into that first learning period would be another check-in during that next period, and then later in the afternoon in that block during that block, and then for those closing connections, if you will, would be another live check-in. But again, the expectation wouldn't be that that's for instructional purposes. That's to check in with the students. Obviously, it will vary on the day, the grade level, and the subject being taught. But the expectation is those check-ins are keeping students engaged and on track for a largely asynchronous day. I would love nothing more than to be able to say that we can keep what we're doing now. And I keep hearing people say, my gosh, we're just getting rolling with the remote model. And we're feeling, if you speak with educators, we're feeling more comfortable with it by the day. I've spoken to families who have said, yes, there are certainly families and many who it's challenging for because there are 2 working parents, and that provides incredible challenges for daycare and folks who did not sign up to be teachers, who are teachers at home. And there are many who are saying that it's working very well. So we would love to be able to say that teachers are going to be able to maintain that same schedule and pay as much attention to the students in front of them in the classroom as they will on those on the screen, and vice versa. But the reality is that it diminishes the overall educational product. So that's the most significant change. I know there have been questions about what the in-person learning days will look like. And again, that will vary from our youngest learners up through the 12th graders, but it is not an assumption that it's a replication of home in the classroom. So it's not a matter of when students are at home, they're streaming live and seeing the same lessons, and when they're in the classroom, they're sitting at their desk streaming live. That is not the model of the plan, or the plan that has been agreed. Is that it's a matter of those in-school days allow an educator to work directly with students to address, to teach in the way that they normally would be teaching when we were in normal school times. So obviously that, again, as I noted, there would be times when it's synchronous and when that's appropriate, but that is not the model where ultimately it's the same thing as they would be doing at home. They're just experiencing the same thing with the teacher in the classroom. That is not the plan that we've set up. So I don't know, Kim, if you want to add anything, if I've left any details out, but I think that was the major change. I mean, I'm not going to go through the 5-page document unless there are specific questions, but overall, it's a Monday synchronous day, which is largely the same as what students are experiencing now. The last 90 minutes of every Monday will be asynchronous. Our teachers, all of our teachers and educators, special education, regular education, instructional assistants will be collaborating during that time to make sure that the instruction is effective the balance of the week. So Mondays are largely a synchronous day, very similar because students are at home. And then cohort A will be in the building Tuesday and Thursday. Cohort B is in the building on Wednesday and Friday. And high priority students continue to be in the school all 5 days per week. They will transition home after lunch on Mondays, the high priority students, but they will still be in the building all 5 days a week working with educators directly. So the only other piece that we've talked about, and we haven't come up with the perfect solution yet, is we did determine that preschool was high priority, and ultimately decided that they would be in I say every day, but every day on their normal schedule. It's a 2-day or 3-day or 4-day a week half-day preschool schedule. Those were reduced days. We've had a discussion about making those full blocks as they normally would have been. Currently it's 90 minutes. They would have been, I believe, 2 hours and 40 minutes, something like that, on a normal scheduled day. We've had discussions about adjusting that back. We've also had discussions, there's a lot of suggestions about kindergarten being considered high priority and bringing them in. I should say this, there's been a lot of discussion about all primary grades being considered in person or being considered high priority and bringing them in person as much as possible. Kindergarten being a half-day program certainly allows us a little more flexibility because we still have the cohorting issue where if we have class sizes of 17, 18, that doesn't allow us to bring a full class into the school and still maintain that 6-foot distancing. So we've had lots of different discussions. I don't know that we're prepared to propose something to you tonight, but we've talked about on the in-person days bringing those kindergarten students in for the full day. We've talked about the concept of an AM/PM that I know in kind of dipsticking that concept with some parents that have reached out. I know that provides a great challenge in that folks who have already figured out childcare, midday transitions are very difficult. So still working through that. If the vote is to move towards hybrid, we would come back to you with a plan. It probably wouldn't be in place ready to go on October 15th. I'm sorry, October 13th, but something that we would continue to work towards, that potentially shifting kindergarten to more in-person learning. Certainly, as I said, the youngest grades, it is just not ideal. It's not ideal remote learning for anyone, but certainly the younger the students, the more challenging it is to learn remotely. So I think that's the highlights of the plan and primarily the changes.
Stop and
Skip.
take questions because I see
Yeah.
Paul has his hands up before you go on
Sure.
to the full-time remote option, which I think is going to be the next thing on the list.
Sure. Yep.
Can I ask you to do a quick thing, Brian? Can you just adjust your mic while are you using your wired headset with the mic in line?
Is that better?
It's getting a tapping sound. It almost sounds like somebody's typing, but you're the only one unmuted. So I think it has to be your mic, maybe.
Is that it? Is that better?
It sounds better now, but it was happening on and off before. Just
I think it was tapping on my collar.
oh,
Yeah. Sorry.
that sounds about right.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So first I have a question. I have 3 questions, Brian. One is for David McGee, and I'm going to throw that question out there first.
Okay.
You can sit forward, and then I'll throw out my other 2, and he can think about the question. But I think it would be helpful for the committee to hear from David about how the in-person instruction has gone with the high-need students. That's my first thing I'd like to have the committee hear from David. The second question, issue really statement, Brian, more than anything is the teachers. One thing that hasn't been brought to the committee, I'm a member of the Personnel and Negotiations Committee, and I just want to share with everyone that the teachers feel like they're really hitting their stride. And of course, we're not speaking about all the teachers, but the teachers that are on the negotiating committee, they feel like they're really hitting their stride right now. They're not saying no to hybrid, but they're just saying, we're really getting our arms around this remote thing, and it's really going well. And that's the second thing I want to say. The last thing is more of a Brian question. And that is, Brian, if we go to hybrid, do you have a sense of how many active teachers that we have right now are not going to be in the schools for whatever reason? Do you have a sense of that?
Yep. I would say, we have a list of mid-30s of individuals who have reached out. So our process, just to make sure everyone's understanding, there is protected leave available for individuals who have a condition, health condition, diagnosis, ongoing condition, or those who are dealing with childcare issues. So under regular FMLA and FFCRA and other protections through COVID relief legislation, there are leaves available, extended leaves available for faculty and staff. There's also, obviously under the Americans with Disability Act, ADA, those who have a condition or a qualifying diagnosis of some type qualify to have ADA accommodations. Certainly they need to be reasonable. And so that has been a significant challenge. Kyle has also been taken on that role as the business and finance guy. So the HR falls under his domain. And so he's been the point of contact. So that those upper 30s now, probably approaching 40 individuals range from someone who has said, you know what, they have the means and they're just going to take an unpaid leave of absence for a year and step away. So there's that on up down through folks who have, again, the childcare issues that would qualify for protected leave, or those who are requesting an accommodation. Obviously, the most routine accommodation is working remotely. And so while we're in full remote, that is obviously a very different and much easier accommodation to provide for someone than when we shift to in-person and all the students are back in the building. So of that list of 40, I think it will be a fraction of those. Certainly some of those are already confirmed out on leave. But my guess is there could solidly be, is it safe to say, 12 to 15 individuals? Would you say that's a safe guess, Kyle?
That's a fair number, yeah.
Yeah, I would say 12 to 15 that I would expect will likely be out of the building in some capacity. Short-term leave, full-term, full year leave of absence. That would be my guess. So that is certainly, we talked about with the remote option, we have to provide that option. We don't have a choice but to provide that option, and that option has to be provided within the resources we have available. So, and we can talk about this in a moment, but one of the realities of that is, if as families choose that option, that decreases class sizes of students coming in, and we would need to condense classes to free up teachers to be assigned to those remote classes. So between that, providing a significant disruption to some classes, obviously not all, but any class that would need to be condensed at the elementary level or potentially the middle school level, as well as teachers who we can likely assume will be taking a leave when we shift back to hybrid. There will definitely be disruptions. There will absolutely be multiple situations where the teachers that students have started the year with, that will shift. And it will be everything, depending on the remote option, that might be that just in with a different current teacher, or there might be situations, several situations where we would have a substitute in place for the balance of the year. Is that fair, Kyle, Kim, Dave? Is that, you're nodding. So does that answer the question, Paul? So we'll go to the question for Dave.
The David McGee question?
That'd be great if David could just address that other question.
Certainly.
Please.
Yeah, so the question that was asked 5 minutes ago after Brian started talking, so I'll try to.
Yeah, so
yeah. No, so as far as the in-person learning, I have to say that I think I could speak for the principals and the staff. We are very pleased on how kids have reacted, how staff has reacted and responded. I think the buildup to going back to school was more anxiety provoking than the actual getting kids back in school. So, several months back, we were saying that the kids with severe disabilities could never wear masks, or they're never going to tolerate, masks for kids in the ASD program. And kids, for the most part, there are very few kids that have, if they have a doctor's note or an exception, they're not wearing masks, but the majority of the kids are wearing masks. They're following the protocols. Teachers are distancing. I mean, they're in full PPE at times when they need to be, which is another. I know it's not comfortable for anybody, but people are. I think kids are much more resilient than maybe we gave them credit for in the beginning. We all thought that there's no way we could do this, but so far, again, there are some staffing issues. We're trying to hire some instructional assistants, but we've brought in some additional resources from outside companies to help us get through that patch. But yeah, as far as, I'm like really pleased, and I wouldn't say shocked, but I think that everybody was really nervous about the first day of school. And now I think that, not that I'm not minimizing how difficult it is. It's not normal. It's not comfortable, but I mean, so far people are reacting in the appropriate way. We started testing again, which was another big, issue in terms of conducting evaluations. Psychologists and teachers were nervous about how do I test a student with PPE on, but we've worked through that. So we've started, again, there's going to be a backlog, and I'm trying to work with parents and families to understand that we haven't been able to test since March 13th. So obviously there's going to be a backlog, but for the most part, I mean, parents have been understanding, teachers have been understanding, and not that it's not stressful, and I would say it's very stressful, but I think the buildup was a lot worse than actually getting kids back in the building. Once kids were back in the building, I think teachers' instincts sort of kicked in, and they knew what they needed to do. And so overall, I think things are going, I would say, better than I expected, because I think we all felt that it was going to be a disaster, and these kids were going to be not able, because we have our highest priority kids in the building. And some of it is too, I think, there's not as many kids in the building, so it was a nice transition to have a smaller cohort of kids come in. There's not the hustle and bustle of every day, the hallways. So some of the behavioral issues we were seeing when school was in full time, we're not seeing that dramatic increase, just because it's a little bit more, hallways are quieter, the school is quieter, there's not as many kids. So yeah, I would say I'm pleasantly surprised, and again, not with a lot of hard work from the teachers and a lot of sacrifice, and we're all sort of on a new learning curve, but
it's a significant challenge to learn the new curve, right? The new normal it's a hard hurdle to get over, but everything from transportation, students are riding the regular big yellow buses, vans are going, obviously ridership ratios are all down. But by and large, it's worked really well. And that is, you know, as David mentioned, that is to the credit of a lot of educators who are doing incredible work to make these kids comfortable. Because it's not normal when you come in and you're wearing, you know, you're working with someone and they need to have on a gown and a face shield with a mask and eye protection and gloves. That's not how we normally teach. So it's hard for educators and it's hard for students. So it's been a challenge, but it's been a great process so far.
Did that answer all your questions, Paul?
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Anyone? Paul Mayette?
So this just goes to coming back in hybrid. I've got 2 hiring questions. Back in the summer, you mentioned trying to find substitute nurses. And now looking at the situation next door in Newburyport, it seems like substitute teachers are going to be a prized commodity. How confident are we that we'll be able to fill, especially that second position, the substitute teachers, in a way that can keep things going smoothly in the hybrid model?
That's a great question, Paul, or great 2 questions, I should say. Nurses, we've actually made pretty good progress on. It took the efforts of many. You know, Narissa was putting out APBs, and we've had nurses and friends who are nurses, and we literally culling from far and wide to try and to get substitute nurses. So I don't know the exact number as of today, but I've signed several hire letters hiring per diem nurses so that we now have multiple substitute nurses. With the goal towards having, when we open up, if the vote is to move to hybrid, to have at least for the first several weeks until we find our new rhythm, to have 2 nurses, 2 full registered or licensed nurses in the building. And we're moving towards that ratio. I don't know if we've quite have the 5 subs yet, but I know I've signed at least 3 letters. Also reached out to Jake's is the hospital. It's Endicott College, who has a nursing program in working to get nursing students in as more, I call them like nurses' office assistants. So they certainly have taken some coursework, not credentialed to do anything medical or make any medical decisions, but just another informed, able person. So, so Tara is still here. She just appeared. So what's the number, Tara? How many do we have?
Yeah, sorry, I'm like in the middle of putting my daughter to bed. And
It's okay.
So, we've hired 3 substitute nurses. They're all wonderful. Most of them right now will be helping out in I'm just filling holes, but in the high school primarily, which can service the high school, middle school. And I'm in contact with Endicott, and I'm trying to iron that out as well to get some nursing students on board. So we're good. For that standpoint, there's still a few more needed, but I think we're in a good place with that.
Awesome. Thank you for popping back up.
Just some more time.
Yeah, so we're definitely in a different, better place than we were 4 or 5 weeks ago, because it was just, I mean, sounding the alarm and there were no bells going off. So we're in a much better place. As far as substitute teachers, we actually put out anticipated openings, I don't know how long ago now. Depending on the school, we started posting those a couple weeks ago. Just, you know, it obviously caused a little bit of angst, and we had tried to reassure people that anyone who had suggested they might be needing to be out, seeing that as a forced hand, and we certainly haven't made any final decisions, but as we've done all along, we're planning for every possible contingency. So we do have postings open for positions that again, folks that are on that list that Kyle has, that folks have identified that they may need to be out, or an accommodation that if we can't provide the accommodation. So there are definitely some leads on positions, but I believe you asked how confident am I? I would not use the word confidence that we are going to be able to fill all those positions. So I think there will be, I should take that back. We'll be able to fill positions when you get into any type of specialized area at the high school where we're looking for physics teachers, right? Not a dime a dozen, or other specific content specifically at the secondary level, that will be very challenging to make sure that we have a licensed history or science or math teacher. And that's not to say it'll be easy at the elementary level, but an elementary license is more widely held. And so there are folks who would be applying for those roles. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm not confident that we'll start on the 13th with a fully staffed outfit as we normally would for all the positions district-wide. And unfortunately, you know, we can't require a time frame for folks, right? So if any one of us in our jobs, there are protections that we have as employees, and there's no timetable that says you have to notify us by a certain date. Certainly everyone has been incredibly reasonable and so helpful and communicative based on the needs, and they're all genuine needs. But a lot of it is riding on the vote tonight. And if we shift to hybrid, that is going to certainly force, some people have some people have the luxury of making a choice. Some people, it's quite literally a matter of life and death, and it's not a choice that they can make. So I hope that answers the question.
Good, Paul Mayette?
It answers the question I probably should have added in there. What I was originally actually thinking was just the day-to-day subs. Somebody's sick for 2 days. I can't imagine how Newburyport's going to handle 10 at the middle school. I've heard tell of districts having to pull IAs out of one class to cover another here and there stories. So just that.
The day-to-day sub. Good question.
Yeah, and
Oh,
Paul,
Kim wants to go. I know. Yep.
I was going to say, we have about 12 super subs. So now I don't want Newburyport to know about our super sub list, but that they have been attending trainings alongside the teachers. And I want to say this week they're actually shadowing. They have to shadow teachers as they're doing their remote learning. So they're really getting a feel for what it is like to be a remote teacher, so that just like you said, in case somebody is out for 2 weeks or such, that we have some availability. I can tell you that there's been a couple already put into play early on. But my biggest concern right now is the lack of the specialty type substitutes that you would need for an extended long-term subbing position. So if you think of substitute as kind of short term, up to 2 weeks, elementary, middle school, and then you think of, okay, 3-4 months or whatever, that extended amount of time, and it's an area like Brian had said, it's physics or I don't know, French or whatever it is. That's where it gets really, really tricky, and there are not a lot of folks out there who have the qualifications that could potentially come in and just fill those roles. And remember, it's a different teaching environment. So not only the content might be new, but also the platforms and all the technology. It's going to be a huge learning curve for those particular people coming in.
But just to add, and kudos to Kim, so those 12 super subs, we need a better name, but our super subs went through, we had 10 days of professional development. They didn't, I don't know, they came to all 10 days, but they had access to all those trainings on Google Classroom and all of that, so that they can seamlessly move into classrooms. And so kudos to Kim and Anna for all their planning on getting that in place.
Excellent, thank you. Paul Goldner, I don't know if you intentionally put your hand down or not.
Yeah, I did. Put it down intentionally. That question got answered.
Okay. Did you have another one? No, you're good. Okay. Maureen, you were up next.
Well, Paul Mayette asked my first question about subs, because that is a huge, huge concern as we go forward. I guess, Kim, I would just follow up on the 12 super subs. Are they spread out K through 12, or is it primarily elementary?
So we have definitely more at the elementary level for sure. We do have some at the middle school and high school, but I would say those that are at the high school, I want to say we have 3, but they don't necessarily have any specialized areas. They're just general general knowledge, liberal arts degrees that have either an interest or a background, or could be a retired educator, but certainly not the level of specialized content knowledge that you would need to replace a full-time teacher.
I mean, I think subs is going to continue to be a concern in any model of education that we're providing. I mean, even pre-COVID, subs were kind of hard to come by. So my other question, I guess, Brian, as we discuss the possibility of moving into a hybrid, is it possible to set it up that it would be a phased-in approach, where you were kind of talking earlier about bringing, you know, some of the younger grades in? I mean, if we were to vote to return to hybrid, could we set it up where it would be phased in, say we bring in first the K through 3 and you know, get them in and settled, and then we move on to another section, you know, another section of grades? Is that something that could be done?
Yes, we talked about that early on, but that we've never had that as part of our plan, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. That is absolutely possible. Yeah. Yeah, I think the discussions, I think at the committee, if we go back and watch, and I don't know whether it was full committee or with other folks, but I mean, I think it was there's certainly a balance of who's at the most risk with what's the statement about, we're saying if we're bringing everyone in person at the elementary but not at the secondary. And so I think there's certainly the argument that if everyone's at risk, everyone's at risk. But there's certainly the counter argument that at the primary level, at the elementary level, it is certainly far more challenging to maintain an effective remote model than at the secondary level.
Okay, that's all of the questions I have for right now.
Anyone else from the committee who has questions? So I have a couple of questions and a couple of pleas, I guess, Brian. One of the questions that has come up consistently today as we talk about this more asynchronous independent work on the remote day is whether, especially at the elementary level where it's heavily adult dependent, schedules would come out farther in advance so that caregivers could better anticipate what the independent day work would be that's coming. I think, you know, the concern is right now they're very often hearing the instruction and then helping out with that, in some cases, that independent work. And they're going to, all the instruction, of course, the in-person days are going to be very instruction heavy. So they're going to lose hearing that piece that then helps with understanding and completing the independent work. And they want to, you know, I guess there's this concern that if they don't have a chance to kind of preview it and ask questions that might come up ahead of time, that that in that period between, you know, that real quick check-in and when their student is supposed to be working on this independent work, if there's any sort of a issue, a bump in the road, it could derail them until the next check-in, at which point they've lost that time in between. So I think the hope is if they could get the schedule more than, you know, just that day, that would help them kind of plan and preview. I don't know if that's a possibility, Kim, or if it's something you even talked about. This seems to be a fairly big concern.
So I don't know if you want to jump in, Kim, but I think the schedule should stay the same, right? So are we talking schedule, or if there's specific assignments? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say, because the schedule, that will be, you know, like we said, it will have to adjust in hybrid because there's kids in the building and lunches and all that.
Right.
But as far as the schedule not changing day to day, assignments is what you're saying, can that be posted?
Yeah. Or at least some written directions that, you know, come with the assignment, so that if you did miss it, there's something written that you can go back to and refer to and say, nope, this is what you need to do. Can you do that? Kind of like a safety net. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had questions about the why about that too. Yep.
Yeah. There's just that fear that if you have that 45-minute block, right, when something's supposed to be getting done, and you're 5 minutes into it and realize that, oh my gosh, you know, whatever, something's not working, or, you know, you didn't get the full directions on how to do it, or
Yeah.
whatever, that you're
Yeah.
lost that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
that's a
your-
good point.
I should say your student has lost that time.
Yeah.
And then I know this has obviously been a conversation clearly that you guys have been having, but I would just encourage you to be continually reviewing the high risk. The high risk is outside of what the school committee does, but I'm hoping that we're continually looking at who should be considered high risk for more in-person time. And then the last one is a huge plea on my part. I think the most common thing I have heard about from families who are urging for hybrid is that their students need the social time. And there's a perception that the hybrid in-person days are going to look very much like what the what a quote unquote normal school day would look like, something that had happened last year, this time last year, what it would look like. And you know, we know that that's not true, I guess. But I don't think that that's a common knowledge that students are literally going to be sitting 6 feet apart at an individual table in a cafeteria, all facing the same direction, that it's not going to be that social situation, that recess is not going to be that social situation, that passing in the halls is not going to be that social situation. And that I think even on those hybrid in-person days, if the vote goes that way, that there's going to need to be, I think, appropriate expectations set. Otherwise, we're going to have sort of a mental crash from students and families who are expecting that social interaction to really pick up on those in-person days. But I think also, you know, as a district, if we can do anything to sort of supplement those social interactions within, you know, the protocols and procedures that we have, that we do that, because it's clearly important. I just, knowing what I know about what a hybrid in-person day looks like and having seen pictures of the cafeterias, I don't think it's going to be the experience that a lot of families and students think it's going to be.
So I would say two things to that. One, that's actually leadership team is meeting tomorrow. I think a lot of principals probably on this call listening, but yes, absolutely take that away as something. I don't know if that was last night's meeting or another meeting where that was identified, and I think that's a good point, that kids need to be prepared, right? Families need to understand what that looks like. So yes, we will work on that. The other thing I will say is I think, having had the experience of my own son go back to high school in a neighboring district, I think it's also not as extremely negative as people have some people, I mean, have it in their minds. It is not the same. It is weird, right? Complained all the time about in the cafeteria, sitting in individual desks facing the same way, but everyone talks to one another. You know, 6 feet is not a mile. So you don't have assigned seats, but they have a great system. And I know Patrick was over visiting where there are QR codes where when a kid sits down, they scan the code, type in the seat number they're in, and then it logs into a form. So when it gets time for Nadine to have to do contact tracing at the high school level, they know exactly where the kid was at the time. So systems are in place, ingenious systems, quite honestly, that are being put into place to hopefully make it will not be antisocial. It will not be the normal social, but I think I'd also don't want to make it up to be so bad, but I do think we need to set some realistic expectations. So yeah, I have that on the agenda for tomorrow to find some creative ways next week to help paint that picture through video or other ways.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect, because it isn't going to be awful, right? But you're not going to have your 6 best friends at the table around you and be able to have that conversation. That's not the reality it's going to be. And I think,
well, you can have that conversation, but it's not going to be so quiet. You're going to have other people hear that conversation. So maybe it's not a bad thing, just saying.
Paul, I'll come to you, and then Kaylee, I'll come to you in a second.
So, Larissa, to your first point about what can be done for students in the elementary grades when they're on their asynchronous and they're lost. to quote Sue Densmore, who's taught 32 years in the district, she said that when they began the fall remote work, they all felt like first year teachers. And as much as it would be great to be able to put on that extra level of protection that you're striving for in a hybrid situation, I just think you're going to put them back to that first year. Whereas right now they're second, third, or fourth years because we're 2 or 3 weeks into this. So I just want to share that with you. They're doing well with the remote, but they're really going to be struggling with the hybrid and going right back to square one. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And I think, you know, the request I keep getting is just getting that list of assignments or the set of assignments so that you have, because usually it's on a daily basis right now at the elementary schools, right? You get a list between whatever 10:10 and 10:30, they're supposed to be doing this, and there's a link to it. Just getting that ahead of time so that if there are questions when you're doing that quick attendance check-in, they can get answered then. Or if it's, you know, previewed the night before, an email could be sent in real quick to just say, like, I tried the login for tomorrow morning and it's not working. Can you just take a look at it before school starts tomorrow, that type of thing. So I think that's more of what's being looked for, but I totally appreciate that. And Kaylee, you'll probably all notice that Kaylee looks like a high school student. It's because she is a high school student. Kaylee is our student member on the school committee. So she's a non-voting member, but otherwise, you know, is like any other member, just a whole lot younger looking.
So I just wanted to speak towards what Nerissa had said about the fact that students definitely think that hybrid is going to look more like a normal school day than it actually is. Even like with the people I've talked to, I have a few friends who are in person, I have friends who are out back in home, but it's definitely a culture shock for us, for everyone, when we see what in school is actually like. Because the school has recommended that we video chat during what our lunch blocks would be. It doesn't really work like the school thinks it would, but we've tried it. And it does not work for a school, in school versus out of school system at all. And the whole lunch thing, it is like they're at desks, they're not at their tables. And I definitely think that's something that we need the community to understand because it's not being addressed.
But Maureen's going to go in just a second. Thank you, Kaylee. And I think clearly the superintendent's taking notes here. So Maureen, go ahead, and then I'll come to you, Paul Goldner.
Just sort of wanted to add, I have a high schooler myself, and I have spoken to a number of students as well, and I do think that there's a real misconception of what those hybrid days back in school will look like. And I've tried to explain to kids that they will have, single desks at lunch, one-way hallways, if I understand correctly, at the high school. And so when I've sort of laid that out, I sort of had the same reaction. They're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I don't want that." So maybe we should just stay remote. So it's just been interesting. So thank you, Kaylee, for saying that. I think it was, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there right now what it's going to look like.
Thanks, Maureen. Paul Goldner?
Yeah, just sort of to that point. Yesterday in Newburyport, the juniors came in for their social, emotional, and such at the high school. And as that was starting, the fire alarm went off, which I'm sure that was somebody deciding that they were going to be funny. But everybody goes outside, and it was the first time since the students came in that I actually saw the students' shoulders move into like that relaxed position, and the sort of body language translate, because they were outside a few feet away from their friends, but actually talking instead of like walking in the single file lines through the hallways or whatever else. And that expectation of what in school is hasn't really been like matching up what what they're getting and what they're able to do, but that still, like, yes, I need to be a few feet away from my friends and chat with them, that they accident.
Just lost your audio, Paul. Can you try unmuting and just say the last thing you said again? Paul? You can't unmute? Oh, there you go.
You lost me.
There you are.
We just lost your audio for like the last sentence of whatever you said.
Oh, okay. I was winding down.
All right, fair. All right. Any other comments or questions from the committee on hybrid? All right, seeing none, if we could move on to the full-time remote option.
I'll talk about this. You want me to? I'll do a little intro, and then I know Kim will probably fill in some blanks. So this has similar to the HVAC system, with Kyle spending the last 3 months. Kim and Anna have spent a lot of time on this. I know there's been similar to what I mentioned about the hybrid plan. What we anticipated we'd be able to offer back in August is very different now, as we've continued to analyze the resources we have. Back to Paul Mayette's question about staffing, who will be here, who might not be here. And so the challenge is that what we can offer is largely dependent on the number of families that choose this full-time remote option for their children. So the ideal is that we are providing Triton educators teaching Triton content and materials using Triton's resources. That is at the elementary level. We anticipate that will be possible. Actually, an email went out about an hour before the meeting tonight, just to give, I think a 2-pager overview. So in essence, at the elementary level, it would be individual, or depending on the number, we would create new cohorts of students with a Triton educator, likely an elementary educator, assigned to them. And we would combine classes from across the 3 elementary schools, and it would be an entirely remote class with a teacher who would work with them remotely, and it would be very similar to what we have in place now. Certainly a kindergarten is different than a 6th grade, but at the elementary level, largely it would be very similar to what we have now, but again, a combined class. In order to achieve that, depending on the numbers, we would, as more families are opting into that full-time remote option, that would reduce the number of students in classes, in current classes at NES, PGS, and SES. And then any of those classes that shift to very small numbers, we would then reallocate the remaining students to the other sections and free up that one teacher. So we would end up condensing sections. So that will mean the only way we can achieve that is that there will be sections, and again, it'll depend on the number of students across the board. If there are smaller numbers, we would probably have multi-age groups, so a grade 1 and 2 together. Maybe there's 17 grade 1 and 2 students from across the district working with one teacher. So we'd only need to collapse one class to achieve that number. So it will totally depend on the numbers, but we would have to collapse classes to free up teachers to work with those students all the time. At the middle school, we hope that's a possibility, and if the numbers warrant, that would actually allow, that's not true. It's a little different, right? So it's at the middle school, it's either students continuing with their current classes. So students would stay, if I'm in whatever my social studies teacher, it's maintaining that same class with the current teacher, just staying remote entirely. That would work if we had very small numbers. So one student that's staying remote, a teacher could work with that one student individually. If it's 5 kids, 4 kids, 7 students, that obviously becomes entirely more challenging. So, so that is one option. If the numbers are small, the alternative is similar to the elementary. We would collapse sections. and free up one of each of the content educators to work with a remote group. And it would be, students would be cohorted by content. And so there'd be a 7 and 8 cohort for social studies, for science, and that 7-8 cohort would travel together through those independent content teachers. So somewhat similar to the elementary, but it's by content instead. At the secondary level or at the high school level, there is no collapsing of classes. It's 150 plus different sections that are implicated just by the number of folks that have identified their interest in that full-time option as of today, and growing. So with that many sections, there is no way to collapse like you can a second grade classroom or a first grade classroom, just due to the breadth of the number of the varied courses. So there is, if the numbers are small, we would be able to do similar with the middle school. We'd be able to have those students continue in their classes with their current teachers on their same current schedule and just have a primarily remote experience or have a fully remote experience. It would be significantly more asynchronous because of the fact that obviously a teacher is going to be working in the classroom with students. And so the remote student wouldn't be in with the teacher. And so there would be a lot less synchronous contact time. However, the benefit is stay with the class, stay with the teacher, stay with the content, stay with the pacing. The alternative to that, and if I was to guess right now, I think probably the more realistic approach is that we will have to partner with the Florida Virtual Learning School Academy. And that is a fully remote online learning management system platform. I think Anna, we had a information session last night, and Anna said 85 to 90% of the classes that are currently being offered at the high school are offered through Florida Virtual, APs, honors, all different levels of courses. And so in doing that, obviously the breadth is, we're able to keep the breadth of programming for the students. We don't have to cancel specific classes. And then we would work with educators to have content teachers available where students could check in. And then once a week, they would have a session with an academic coach that would just keep them on pace overall. So again, both of those options would be largely asynchronous and self-paced. Florida Virtual with a confirmed proven platform. If not through that, if it's smaller numbers, it would be working directly with our teachers in developing that. So the challenge is we don't know until we know the numbers. And so based on the feedback last night, it was actually very helpful, I think, both ways, that we were able to answer some questions for families, but there were also some great suggestions. And another survey went out just before this meeting, asking a little bit more clarifying information, basically saying if it was, because we're still looking at various models, asking families now to say, okay, if it was the Florida Virtual, would you choose that? Or if it was the Triton educators, would you choose that? Or would you choose it regardless? So hopefully teasing that out, asking families to commit that first round, if you will, by Friday. And that will then give us information where we'll be able to confirm our model and ask families to commit early next week. So that is the plan. I don't know if I missed anything, Kim, or if that's the summary. So any questions on that? Again, the key that this does require that we're collapsing classes, particularly at the elementary level. It is the only model that we're putting forward because it's the only viable model that we have. So that would impact that, if there was a student who was in one of those classrooms where the numbers were decreasing, that a student could have their teacher changed on them, even if they are not choosing the remote option. So.
Okay. So first of all, thank you to Brian, Kim, and Anna, and everyone else for all your work on this, because it's clearly an elaborate system here. Erin, did you have a question?
I did. So I guess I wanted to clarify a little bit when you were talking about the high school and the classes themselves. Would the individual have the opportunity to to remote into their class if it's 1 or 2 students in the class that are interested in being remote, full-time remote, in a class relatively unchanged. Is that what I was hearing you say, Brian? It's either going to be that, or it's going to be the Florida program, or is it that you have to have enough kids for a history class to have a remote history class?
Yeah, no, so it's the smaller the numbers, the more possible it is for us to have Triton educators, have students stay with their current classes and take we'll call it a largely asynchronous self-paced track, if you will. So
let me clarify just a little bit more, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So when you say the smaller the numbers, are you looking at like Mrs. Jones's class has 1 student and then Mrs. Smith class has 1 student, so the smaller number per class, or is it per grade level, the numbers of kids?
It's per class.
Okay.
Obviously the numbers drive the numbers. So it's, but it is on a per class basis, because if I'm a student in your classroom and I'm going to go full remote, you're now, Mondays we could do simply, right? The whole class is remote. I would have the same learning experience. On Tuesday, when cohort A is in, you're going to be largely tied up with the students sitting in front of you. That doesn't mean there won't be anything synchronous for me on my remote day, but I'm going to have to be more independently keeping up with the work that the remote students are doing on that day. And then the next day, when the second cohort is learning remotely, again, keeping self-paced. So I'm not going to have that opportunity to check in with you because the teacher isn't holding live synchronous lessons like we are now when everyone is home. So that only works if there's a small number of students, because the teachers, that requires a lot of extra on the teachers, because you still have to check in with me as a student. And if there's 1 student, very easy to do. But if there's 7 students and I've got to check, you have to check in with all of us independently, that becomes very challenging, because ultimately we don't want to put forward a product and a model that doesn't allow students to keep pace. And so it's, yeah, I think that's a period after that statement.
Good. You good, Aaron? Okay, thanks. Paulise?
Brian, in the Florida model, who's going to oversee the students' progress?
So we will have, there's 3 roles. I don't know if you want to go over the 3 roles, Kim.
Sure. There's the technology kind of integrator, and that's the person who would be working to look at the students, the high school students' schedule, to look at the courses that are offered through the Florida virtual school, making sure that they are the same and they can easily transition into that particular course. So they have their own learning management system. So it wouldn't be like a Google Classroom. They would have to have some direction on how to navigate through their learning system, because it is very similar, where it has files that they need to open, or there's videos that they would be watching. And so that person would really be behind the scenes working through those technology issues and supporting that student through using that learning platform. So that's one of the roles. The other role would be a content specialist. And so there would be 1 per, say, science and math and ELA, that although they're not responsible for teaching the content and the material, they would be certainly responsible for reviewing that student's progress, because that would be their area of expertise. And they would be looking to review their progress, as well as making grading assessments and grading and that particular piece of it as well. The other role would be a remote coach, and that particular person would be in charge of making sure that student is following their schedule, completing the work, showing up for help sessions when they are scheduled, and kind of that in-between person between that content specialist, the technology integrator, and that the student themselves. So just a way to keep everybody aligned and supporting one another.
How do you grade that person, that student?
Yep, so there's a couple different options within the Florida virtual school. You can certainly develop assessments that are all computer-based, but we would rather have maybe 80% computer-based, and then 20% would be some type of written assessment or evaluation or performance task. That would be up to, that's another thing that specialist would be in charge of as far as they look at the curriculum. And they could certainly also communicate with the, as a liaison between the high school content teacher, just to get some additional information, ideas, or support, so that they really, the goal would be to somewhat keep them aligned, in line with what the curriculum looks like in the Triton at the high school.
So those would be Triton educators doing that. So we're ultimately responsible for the grading and reporting that as a Triton student. They remain a Triton student.
And that's still a negotiation issue, Brian, correct? We haven't hammered through that.
I don't know that we would have to, because it's not an expectation, right? These would be added roles.
Okay.
Right. So it's not, yeah. So that wouldn't be, certainly, if there are individuals who have capacity, that's a discussion, or posted added sections or what have you, that people would have the opportunity to say, I'd like to do that. Yeah. But if it does become a negotiations issue, we would certainly bring it back.
Anything else, Paul?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Paul Mayette, and then I'll come to you after, Kaylee.
So just, I think Kim, you started to allude to this a little bit. The content specialist working at Triton, how much, if any, control would they have over the content of the courses? I'm just thinking, I know chemistry is chemistry, no matter where it's taught, it's confusing everywhere. But when you get into history, you know, you get into language arts, those types of things, you can go around the country and see some very different curriculum. And I'm just curious about that.
There's actually a lot of flexibility. So that particular content specialist could actually use some of our material if they wanted to. They could replace what they have. They could exchange it. They could use common assessments that we use. So there's a lot of flexibility. And I think that's another reason why, when we were looking at the different roles, we really wanted to take advantage of the flexibility of the platform, and that all it had to offer. And so in order to do that, like I said, we had to have a person who was a specialist in that particular area to make adjustments so that it better was aligned with what we're doing and the materials that we're using. So absolutely 100% can be, stuff can be put in or taken out or changed. The pacing can be adjusted as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Kaylee?
I was just wondering, under FLVS, how's the work on that platform going to correlate to letter grades and affect Triton transcripts?
So I believe it would be the same as a student attending the Triton schools, because again, we can look at the course load, what is being offered, what the requirements are, what the assessment looks like, so that the expectation and the criteria will mirror the expectations that we have for our students. So the grade and the transcript, it would be the Triton school who would be giving that grade for that particular child.
And I just had one more question. How are we going to accommodate the students that, say if the student chose to use that, chose fully remote, and that's the platform we went to, how are we going to accommodate the students that are in a class right now that the platform doesn't offer?
Yep, so we talked about there could be situations where if there are not a lot of students in that particular class, it's a specialized class, and the teacher has some capacity to provide instruction for that remote student and have them wrap into their current hybrid model, then that is absolutely a possibility. Because we also realize that there may be some students who, because of graduation requirements, really need to finish and take this course as part of their graduation. So there is some availability for that. We just don't know where those particular courses would land or where they are right now.
I think the key would be those unique courses that are not in the system. And it's important to reiterate again, so you would remain a Triton student. So if there was some elective or singers, or right, some activity or event or class rather that you were part of that couldn't happen through FLVS. Obviously, if you can't come on campus, that will preclude you from some other things, but there may be some people that choose the remote option and would feel very differently about coming to campus if it was a late in the day, it wasn't involving lunches and all of that other, all those other challenges. And if it was a small class, that there would be a possibility of making that work. So we would certainly work to make those unique one-off situations happen if the classes can't happen through FLVS.
All right, thank you. I've been looking at it and I saw that FLVS doesn't offer higher level French, but it does offer higher level Spanish. That was something that definitely stuck out because we have the two different paths at Chayton.
Yep.
All right, other questions from the committee? All right, I have a few myself. So a common question I've gotten is going back and forth, the opportunity to go back and forth between a remote model and a hybrid model at the different levels. Can Brian or Kim, can one of you talk about that just so that it's here out in the open? I know it was covered last night.
Who wants it? You want to go, Kim? I always talk. You
Yeah. So yes, we, obviously the goal is to keep people in one particular track because it's easier for the student. It's less transition, it's less disruptive, but we certainly cannot prevent anybody from switching from one model to the other. We do ask that we have at least a 2-week notice so that the teacher can prepare and that any learning that's happening within their current model, they can close that out per se, finish any assignments or a unit or whatever it is, so that it comes at a kind of a natural transition time. The other thing I would say, another question that kind of piggybacks on that is that if somebody were to get sick and needed to take a leave from a particular classroom, their remote experience or their out of school experience would be 100% overseen by their classroom teacher. They would not just automatically go into this kind of separate track, remote track. They would still be the responsible from their teacher.
You should also say at the depending on which way we're shifting, right? So if we go from remote to hybrid and family chooses remote and then we shift back to remote, our goal would be to keep people in these new tracks wherever we land, because the reality is we could then be shifting back to hybrid. That would obviously be the goal. Certainly at the elementary level where we're creating these, we know it's that model A where we're creating new classrooms that are remote. We would hope to keep those intact. Certainly families have the choice, as Kim said, with 2 weeks notice. And in some cases we could do it sooner than 2 weeks, but depending on the model and what we need to arrange. But hopefully, I think one of the values of that elementary model for the full remote, is the fact that it actually will provide that consistency moving forward.
That was going to be one of my other questions to ask you to re-explain, so you took that one ahead of time. As far as activities,
Before we move away from that, Narissa, before we move away from that, can we stay on it just one more time for a point of clarification? Kim, you just mentioned that if an individual gets sick and goes home, they would still stay with their classroom teacher. Can you explain a little bit about your thoughts on how that will work? Are they going to be involved remotely in the classroom lesson that's going on? Are they going to be logging in and participating that way, or what is your vision for that?
So I think it would depend on how that child is affected by their illness, or why they had to leave, and then the capacity that the teacher has, right? But it would be very similar to if a child was out and they were sick and they knew that they were going to be out for 5 days, they could potentially provide all of the workload up front that they would need to do, or they could have check-ins with the other kids that were home during the remote time if it was hybrid. So there's really a couple different models or different situations that would lend themselves to the teacher kind of shifting and changing how they would communicate the lessons of the day.
But we would say if someone's actually sick, they should be sick, right? Just as
Yeah.
old times, right? But I think it depends on if someone's quarantined and needs to just be out of school for 2 weeks, then if we're in hybrid, again, going back to that model, the in-person days, the teacher is working with the students in the classroom. And again, there will be some synchronous, but primarily the kids at home are on an asynchronous day. So if someone was out, it would be largely asynchronous, but the teacher would work with those students. Again, back to the model where on the full remote option, if there was only one student in the classroom, a teacher could probably make that work. It's when we have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 that it becomes more challenging. So we would almost treat it that way, as similar to that same situation where if it's one student who's sick, right? If half the class becomes sick, right, then we have to pivot and adjust, and certainly we would adjust as necessary.
Is that Erin?
Thanks, Narissa. Yeah.
Thanks. Remote activities, sorry, was the question I was going to. So I, again, gotten this a couple times. If we were talking about the high school having like remote activities, if somebody opted for the remote only option, they would still be able to participate, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just double checking that box. And I just want to
Again,
go.
they're a full-fledged Triton student.
I just want to go back to the teacher shift, because there was a lot of confusion about this today, I think. I know you explained it a couple of times last night, but just to clarify, Brian and Kim, because it's because the remote only option is across the schools and potentially across the grades, there will, if there's a requirement to condense classes, it's going to be limited, right? Because I heard a lot of, I heard that if my child goes back in hybrid, that their teacher is going to change. And that's not necessarily true. If that is, right, it's going to be a relatively small number.
Yes. So, I mean, our ideal is that we'd be able to free up one teacher per grade level at the elementary, but that would only be if there's a large number of elementary students, families who choose that full remote option. But yeah, so it will only impact those classrooms on the teacher that we would be condensing and moving to that remote plan, remote model. So it would be, yes, it'd be limited.
Okay. So if you're going to have one teacher across all the elementary schools for grades 1 and 2, and that happens to be a first grade teacher at elementary school A.
Right. Don't even say it because we have no idea. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea where they're coming from. I just
Nor
want to
do
make
we,
sure this
for the
is
record.
clear.
Yeah.
Elementary school B and C's, first grades and second grades don't get touched.
Correct.
That is true.
Elementary school A's, second grades don't get touched.
Correct.
Okay. And that first grade teacher at elementary school A, her students who want to be in the remote program would remain with her, and all the other remote option students would join her class effectively. And her students that she has assigned right now that are staying in hybrid would be moved into the other probably 2 classrooms that are at that first grade level in school A.
Correct.
Correct? And that's the only disruption.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. That's the way I've been explaining it, and that's not the way
Keep
a lot of
going.
people heard it.
Yeah, that question popped up
was a
quite
lot
a bit.
last night.
Yeah, it kept popping up as well last night, and people kept saying, so every student, every class, and no, it will be limited. And same thing at the middle school. So if that was the model, we would be collapsing a section for each of the core content areas. Only if you have that teacher for that core section would that be would be impacted.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure I was clear on that. Thank you. And actually, that was it. That was my last question. So any other questions on the full remote option from the committee? Seeing none, I think we finally finished with item A.
Yeah, I don't think.
All right. Is there anything else you have to add there, Brian and Kim, before we move on?
The only other thing and I guess it's potentially B, but just a discussion about the fact that when we talked about shift, we said that we were going to look at placing a professional day on the Friday prior, which would be next Friday. So it's technically part of B, but wherever we want to have that discussion.
Okay. All right, let's move on to B then. So this is the actual discussion followed by a vote to make a determination on whether or not to transition to the hybrid learning model. If the transition is called for, it would be on October 13th. And as Superintendent just mentioned, there would be a professional development day on the Friday before that would allow for essentially a transition time. So I guess first of all, I have to say thank you to all of the teachers, the staff that have put so much work into the model that we're working in now. I think I'll just say the public comment was kind of a testimony to some of the successes that have been out there. Obviously, there are people that that have had more of a struggle with this, and I know that that regardless of where folks have been asked to kind of help step up and solve problems, it's been done. Deb Jones and her team have been fantastic with IT. I cannot say enough about Lucinda Ward, who would, I think, happily feed every child she met if she had the opportunity. She's just done a fantastic job, and I know I've literally seen kids staggering under the weight of the meal bags that she is sending home. So kudos to her. Kudos to the folks that are supporting our kids in mental health and with guidance and special education, because I think it's just a testament to the folks in this district. And I just thought it was perfect here. I think she may have signed off, but there's someone who's actually not an educator in the Triton district, but she had a screen cover on her Zoom login that said educators are the heart, I believe, or something like that. And it was perfect to see that, because I think that is so very true of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. So that said, this brings us to the point of discussion. So I usually speak last. There isn't a lot of setup on this one, so I will open it, and whoever wants to start the discussion is welcome to do that. Kaylee's going to start the discussion.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word it correctly. Last meeting, you had asked me to write a report about how the student body is doing.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if there'd be if I could bring that forth.
Absolutely. So I apologize. It's been a little hectic. I'll just say that. So I apologize. Brian and I were working on this agenda, and I totally blanked on that. Now would actually probably be a good time, if the committee is okay with just having you read that aloud and start off the conversation. Does anybody have an objection to that? All right, seeing none, go for it. And thank you, Kaylee, and I'm sorry.
It's completely okay. This year is going to be my year. A quote everyone hears on January 1st every single year. And a quote I'm sure many of you said yourselves. And then 2020 happened. A year where any other year, a single event would have been the headline of the year. We've had wildfires, political tensions, landmark cases, legal, not medical, like we all now think of. The bubonic plague resurfaced. And oh yeah, COVID-19 became a thing. We went from pushing for trips to still happen, to school shutting down, to state of emergencies meant to last 2 weeks, to completely rewritten societal norm. And with that, school too needed to be rewritten. We spent almost every single Wednesday here in Zoomland trying to figure out an answer amongst the utter unknown. We finally settled on fully remote, and here we are, September 30th, 2020, aka March 201st. The Triton student body and the Triton community is one of diversity, whether that be due to nationality, socioeconomic status, religion, politics, and so much more. We celebrate our differences, for it helps bring forth different viewpoints and ideas that we can build and benefit from. All of that said, we are also a community of shared experience. The experience of online learning isn't for everyone, nor are all a fan of it, but I am not here to lean one way or another in this report. I'm here to speak of the shared story of the students. Across the student body, students are confused and unsure as to what the future holds. Everyone is. However, we are being told to make it work while others are crusading for what they think is best for us. What we know for fact is that we simply do not know. We know that students are exhausted, trying to maintain education, the weight of the global crisis we find ourselves in, and social interactions, all while at the same time being teenagers. Students are trying their best and doing what they can. We have only children and families of easily at least 10 attempting online learning. As an only child, I can only imagine trying to get into classes while siblings are trying as well, or trying to find a quiet place to do so. Today, across the district, power blips and outages occurred, and the students frantically reached out to one another, trying to figure out what to do. It was something we had never had to experience before. We are confused by constantly trying to adapt to the newness of society. We still have not heard from the majority of social aspects of school, such as clubs as well. We do, however, understand that we are all simply attempting to adapt to the new world. When discussions of preferred ways of learning occur, the student body is very split. We all understand the safety concerns that are prevalent. We also fully know that certain aspects of the Triton education are nearly impossible to have while remote. From what I've seen, no one is truly okay. However, I do believe that the model of learning, whether it be remote or hybrid, won't change that. The world is not what we were raised to know, but it is not the world anyone was raised to know. We need to accept that remote is not equal to a normal education, nor would hybrid be. This all being said, we need to continue to strive to be better. We are not in the place to be practicing, we need to be acting. But the adapted phrase that I've grown up with, practice makes better, rings true. There is no such thing as perfect in any walk or act of life, but all we can do is strive for better. So it is for this reason that I would like to take the liberty of speaking for the student body and simply ask that the committee follow what they believe is best for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. Very well put. All right. Whoever follows Kaylee is going to have a hard job. I think that's you, Linda.
Kaylee, that was nicely put. You know, this isn't an easy decision to make. From what we've heard from parents last night, they're enjoying the remote part of it, and going back hybrid isn't going to be the school that everybody's used to. There's been a lot of discussion on the map that Governor Baker puts out, and I just want to, whether we go hybrid, whether we stay remote, we all don't work in the confines of our 3 towns. As the health nurse has said, you know, some of the people who are positive caught it from other towns where they work.
Oh, I think you just froze, Linda. All right, she's not unfreezing. So I'm gonna move back on to Paul Mayette, and we can always come back to Linda. Hopefully she'll sync back up with the Zoom. Go ahead, Paul.
Right.
Oh, Linda, are you back?
So
No, I don't think she is. Oh, we missed the tail end of what you said. You froze up. I'm not sure if you're muted now. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I got 2 kids here who are using the network as well. So it's just, you know, we all just have to be vigilant on what we do. Just having the athletic department, you know, we allowed the kids to go play athletics, and now one of the students has the coronavirus, and it's so easy. We get complacent in what we're doing.
Oh, now we lost your audio. Plagued with technical difficulties. Still can't hear you. I think, no, I think the kids have stolen all your bandwidth. All right, we'll give you a minute to try and sync back up, and we'll come to Paul Mayette, and hopefully Linda can pitch back in a minute.
So overall, I'm still arguing with myself over all of this. But I wanted to see, I have two questions that I didn't ask before that seem more pertinent to this moment. So I was wondering if I could put those out there now.
Absolutely.
The first one has to do with potential ramifications. We somehow, for some reason, did not, as to my knowledge, receive the letter from Commissioner Riley. What potential ramifications might there be if we stayed remote, received a second round of that? Are there any potential negative ramifications that could come of that?
So I guess I would say any of the districts that got that letter, I believe. So we had Salisbury that ticked into yellow. I'll go with several weeks back. I don't remember how many weeks back. As of today, Rowley ticked into yellow. So any of the districts locally that have had a blip into a colored coding on that statewide map, who are in remote, did not get that letter. I don't know that as a science, but that certainly seems to be from my investigation. So even those that got that letter, there was some a follow-up call. I don't believe that the state has any statutory authority to override a decision of a local committee. We've been playing on this roller coaster since March. Of what the state can control, and it was going to be directed, and then it was going to be a choice, and it was going to be directed, and then ultimately, it got dumped back on. All right, this is local control. Have fun, school committees. So, at this point, there are certainly those districts that are remote that have made the decision since and are shifting in October, and so have notified DESE of that, and there wasn't any follow through. I don't know of any district that has taken a subsequent vote since receiving the letter to stay remote. Largely we have a structure in place. I think part of the reason we didn't get a letter as well is we have a structure in place and a plan to move towards hybrid as the data and as the situation allows. So to my understanding, there is no authority that the state has to come in. There was threats of auditing information, and I know Narissa was sharing with me information shared by the Board of Ed, and I know you'll want to share that. But at this point, I don't believe there's any statutory authority they have to come in and take your job away from you.
Yeah, and that was echoed during the Board of Ed meeting. So I don't know that they won't try. The comment on the Board of Ed meeting was that they cannot force something on a local district, but they are responsible for enforcing accountability. So they're looking at things like one of the things that they tentatively approved an extension on, but also requested to have on their November meeting was instructional time. There were obviously changes in the instructional time requirements earlier this year. They were set to expire, I believe, today. And so they extended those, but they also put them back on the November agenda. And there was discussion of, could they mandate synchronous versus asynchronous time that had to be put in place, or, how much had to be assigned during a specific time period, that type of thing. They didn't get into a deep discussion, so I don't know where they would take that. But I would agree with Brian, they were definitely of the opinion that they couldn't force anything, but there definitely did seem to be some focus on accountability and what they would do on that end in regard to districts, particularly districts that are in fully remote. There is up on Mass Association of School Committees site I think they call them policy updates, which is a little bit misleading, but it's basically a reiteration of what on in that Board of Ed meeting. So you're welcome to go watch that if you want, or the mass.gov site also stores basically a live stream the recording of the live stream. So it's not a nice tailored video, but it's essentially the raw video that came out of that meeting. And I believe that's up for, I think 30 days they hold it, and then it'll get archived. So you're welcome to go back and watch that if you want, but that's what I took out of that. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, question 2 is kind of a what if scenario that I've got. Listening last night, listening tonight, one of the things that came to me was the outpouring of appreciation in the community for what's gone on so far. That, you know, how much better it was in the spring, everything else, that, well, obviously nothing's perfect right now, that it seems to be going well. If we vote to go hybrid tonight, one of the, you know, concerns I do have is the disruption of that, which could be worth it if we're, you know, if we're getting something from it. I'm wondering if we should go hybrid tonight and something happens in the week in between now and the 13th, would we be where we couldn't follow through with it? Would we stay with what we have, or would we go to, I'm not phrasing this well. You said how if we went hybrid and then had to go back to remote, we'd keep people on that track that we had switched into when we went hybrid. If we vote tonight, are we staying with that, whereas we start that track tonight, or do we start that track on the 13th? Does that make sense as a question?
So the track for the remote option, is that what you mean?
Well, basically, once we, you've said that once we get people, like we break up the class, condense the classes, determine who's going to be teaching what, we would stay with that, even if we wind up coming back to full remote at some point down the line, if we're forced back to full remote. Yeah. Would that staying with it start tonight, or would it start when students went into those new situations on the 13th?
Gotcha. That would start on
just
the 13th.
In case something comes up in the interim.
Yep. So we will be, as of tomorrow morning, or let's be real, as of probably about 11:30 tonight. I've made videos and ready. I've got all the options ready to go, so I can start posting information tonight, so families can be aware. So we will be all systems go regardless tonight. But as far as any changes putting into place, whether that's Florida virtual, you know, we're moving down the path with Florida virtual and would step back if we didn't go down that path. But we're literally planning everything. But no, if we delayed, ended up delaying 2 weeks, 4 weeks, we would start all of that when we do make the shift. I will say there was some discussion last night about the remote option, and delaying that shift if we are having to collapse classes. So if the vote was to move to hybrid, or to delay tonight and not move to hybrid, I think there's some value in actually moving forward with that planning to recalibrate the classes. You know, we're still going to ask families to commit on this first survey, or it's a revamped survey, by Friday, and then let them know early next week, and still move forward with that. Because if we're going to collapse classes, let's not let kids and community grow stronger with that first grade cohort at, you know, school A, or fourth grade at school B that might have to change. Let's do that now and start to already build community. So I, you know, depending on the vote, I would want to reassess that a bit, and review that with the principals. But I think that's the only thing that I would say we would want to do something and not delay that any further. But is actually forcing everyone into, you know, Florida virtual or all those things, that would be when we make the shift.
The only other thing I would say comment-wise, you know, I'm feeling more confident looking at numbers that I have looked at. The spread in schools seems to be minimal nationwide. Although a quick Google search gives you a few different answers, but the studies that I have seen, that I've tried to dig into, seems to be that. It seems to be more about the potential disruption of all of this. Having just gone through this, the move from starting out remote and moving to hybrid myself over the past week, I would definitely say that I would look more favorably upon Maureen's suggestion of phasing it in. I know there were any number of unintended headaches that popped up. Not that anybody intends headaches, but unanticipated, I should say, that popped up along the way that had to be dealt with. That I think if we were dealing with them all in one go, it would have been much harder to go with. So I think that it was a good suggestion on Maureen's part.
Thank you, Paul. Paul Goldner.
Just to sort of piggyback on what Linda was saying before about where cases are coming from. I sort of been looking at the last 3 weeks of the color-coded map. From what I can tell, everything kind of lags 2 weeks. So I feel like starting with the 16th, you're looking at the beginning of school, and our little neck of the woods on that color-coded map is clear and bordered by green. And then on the 23rd, the map is, clear, but now bordered by yellow, and that yellow and green is encroaching. And then this week, we're bordered by red, and again, the yellow and the greens are encroaching. So most of our immediately surrounding towns are still gray, but there's more and more red, and Essex County itself now has about 14.5 cases per 100,000 per day, which is twice the state average of a little over 7. But what's really concerning to me is that daily rate is spiking really, really fast and has doubled in the last week in Essex County. So while right now at this snapshot in time, the numbers here look okay, around us, they're all getting closer and bigger and going up. Even just looking at our little area of clear towns, the numbers are going up by about 30% a week. So I just don't see that we are not entering here in this area a spike, a fairly large spike, because where we are at right now in Essex County are the numbers at the end of May, when we were coming off of our big spike before, and the shape of that graph is very exponential right now.
All right, thank you, Paul. Who else? Tina, was that a yes?
Yes.
That was the half-hearted hand.
Half-hearted hand. I think I can speak for most parents right now that with kids in school that feel like they're drowning. With that being said, I have to say, sort of reiterating what many people have said in the feedback that we've gotten for the community at whole, which is encouraging, is that the teachers across the board have been doing an excellent job with the remote learning. And I can honestly say that I feel like my kids are learning and it's structured. With that being said, I was really hopeful, and I'm heartbroken because I thought I was going to be looking forward to sending them back as soon as possible. I personally would prefer either an all remote or an all in model. And I realize the all in model doesn't make any sense for us right now. My biggest concern in thinking about the logistics of everything and listening to the leadership team talk, as well as having spoken with many educators, not only in our district, but in other districts that are in different models, is that hybrid, once again, is a logistical nightmare, and that I don't know that it would be worth, even for parents like myself that would love to have their kids go back, even if it was 2 days in person, to get that in-person learning and to get a little bit of a breather. I don't know that I feel confident enough in my child's education that we'd be doing right by them on those remote days. So with that being said, as much as everyone's put in the hard work of trying to come up with the best plans to go to hybrid. I don't know that it's a plan that I feel confident in, and I don't know that it's a fair enough plan to accommodate our teachers for them to continue making the gains that they have been with what we've been experiencing remote. So that's sort of where my thoughts are with that.
All right, thank you. Who else? All right, seeing no one. I guess I'll state my, oh, go ahead.
Erin
Aaron.
had her hand up.
And I apologize, while you're talking, I'm just gonna go grab my charger real quick, so I'm just sticking
Okay.
my video on.
All right.
And I'll listen.
Can I start off also with a question, Brian? Have we had any issues with kids currently that are in school outside of what David has already mentioned that have had issues with keeping their mask on? Because I know that we have a number of kids that are in school right now. Have we had any mask issues?
We have not.
Okay.
And I will say preschoolers are model citizens for wearing masks. We thought it would be challenging for preschoolers. You want to know how to wear a mask and wear it well, talk to a 3 or 4 year old.
Perfect. Can you talk, I know you have the network of superintendents. We haven't discussed at all how they're seeing the different pain points in school on their hybrid plans. I know a number of schools went back probably last week, hybrid in the area. Have you had any contact with other superintendents about how those programs are working and some of the feedback that they have initially, as well as how many COVID illnesses potentially that they have had? Because I know hybrid behavioral went back last week remote, and by Thursday in 3 different schools they had 3 cases.
Yep. So there are certainly districts where, and I don't want to name districts, but districts where opened up, into hybrid and had cases pretty quickly and had to shut down sections. Again, didn't shift as a district back to remote, but had to shut down classes or I don't know if a whole school, cases where a whole school had to shut down for 2 weeks. But largely it's been those districts that have moved to hybrid, have remained in hybrid, and have had disruptions, whether it be classrooms, like I was saying. There are plenty of districts that have been in hybrid and have had no cases whatsoever, not any hint of a case. So it certainly, speaks to Paul Goldner's points about the data as things are encroaching, right? When I'm chatting with superintendents, they might be out of our direct area. They might be very close to us. As far as their take on hybrid, every district, when we, back on March 13th, when the North Shore superintendents made the call and said, prior to the governor closing and said, we're closing for 2 weeks, that was an easy thing to do collectively. When we went through the spring and into the summer, there was attempts for us to maintain that, I don't want to use the word synchronous, but that similar path forward as far as scheduling and what a hybrid model would look like. Beginning of the summer, earlier in June, we were told that it was going to be dictated from the Department of Ed what it would look like. So districts have largely gone in very different directions. Hybrid models vary, generally it's an every other day, sometimes it's 2 days together, sometimes it's an every other day like us. So districts have made different choices. But I would say universally in the folks that I've spoken with, and again, I'm not going to name any specific districts or people I've spoken with, hybrid is challenging. It is best, I believe Tina, you said it earlier, it's right. We are set up as an institution to teach students in person in our classroom. Teaching is relational. It's about building that rapport with students. It's about connecting with students. Where as humans, we're best when we're face to face. Second to that is having all of our students in the same place. So as a second best, I understand, and this is not to say and mitigate and negate any of the challenges that a full remote option presents for families. But as an educator, having students primarily, the bulk of the class in front of them in one place, again, not to mitigate challenges for families, technology challenges that we continue to work with and work through. By and large, having students in one location is a better instructional model. When we then shift our resources and teachers are responsible for students who are sitting in front of them and at home. It's not impossible. I think we will do a good job, in similar to remote when we make that shift. It will be good when we start, and we will get better with every day that passes. But it is a much more challenging. I mute myself. Good catch. It will be much more challenging for us to provide a consistent educational model. There will be, as we mentioned, when we 6, 7, 8, 10 weeks ago, we thought we would be able to provide much more synchronous time for students at home. Now, through all of our conversations, in my discussions with superintendents, everyone's realizing that if you try to do that, you diminish the educational product for everyone, those students sitting in front of you, as well as those at home. So the kind of consistent advice I've heard is, if a teacher has students in front of them, have them cherish that time, focus and utilize that time as best they can, and then plan really well for that asynchronous time when students are not with the teachers. So I would say that has been the consistent message I've heard. It's not impossible. I mean, there are certainly success stories as well. And again, depending on grade levels, it works better and more seamlessly than in other areas. But that's been the basic feedback that I've heard from other superintendents and assistant superintendents.
Okay, so my next series of questions, or maybe statements, I don't know how this is going to actually play out, but I do want to talk a little bit about the expectations that families have about what it's going to look like when they do go back into school, because I don't know if they really get the full impact of that, and that's part of what's concerning me, the understanding that when they're in class, what really is it going to look like? There's a lot of questions out there of will my child still be on their Chromebook during the day? Will they still be utilizing the technology resources? And I know that we had talked about that a while back, that we were going to assign the Chromebooks out to everybody so that they could use them at home and in class. I know that there's concerns that the way that the classroom is set up, that students that are on the very edge or in the back of the classroom may potentially not be able to see if a teacher is utilizing a whiteboard or a blackboard behind them to be able to actually see what's on the board itself. So that would then reinforce the fact that we will have kids on their Chromebooks, and perhaps the teacher will be teaching at the top front of the classroom through the technology resource, as well as adding to that, if someone is having difficulty, does a teacher get to go over to the student and show them stuff on the particular Chromebook that they're going through? Or is it something where the teacher needs to maintain the distance and try and give that instruction from afar to be able to keep that social distancing happening?
So you're going to have to make sure I answered all the questions. So we'll start in reverse. So it is not, when we say 6-foot distancing, it is not to say that no teacher or no student will never be within 6 feet of another individual, right? So it's about the spacing of the seats. So when in classroom, when I come in and I sit, I'm spaced. That doesn't mean in the hallways, there's no way to make sure that no student is ever, or any teacher is never within 6 feet. There will absolutely be times. Back to an earlier statement now a couple hours ago with the health agents, the state changing their metric or their standard, if you will, on not a sustained 15 minutes, but a collective 15 minutes within a 24-hour or single day period. That certainly changes that. So I think more and more, any student who has been in a classroom with an individual or any individual who's been in a classroom with other individuals, there's a greater likelihood that a larger portion of that class would be considered a close contact. But there's no way to teach and never come into close contact. But primarily, yes, the instructional model, the layout, if you will, is the teacher primarily at the head of the room. Some teachers can't teach if they're not walking at the same time, so it doesn't mean people will stand still the entire day. But at the elementary level, there are no teacher tables, and there's no rug area for the kids to go sit at and gather and have morning meeting. So all of those components are absolutely gone. And it is a largely structured teacher at the head of the room, and primarily distant from the kiddos, but it doesn't mean that there will never be any contact, that a teacher can't walk over to a student, whether that is to redirect or to help explain something. I feel like there were more questions in there that I'm not answering.
So one of the other questions was about the ability to see the board and whether or not they would be using the Chromebooks more in class.
Thank you. So I guess the difference is, and I know Michael Rossi asked the question, or made the statement that this is not, will students use their Chromebooks on their in-person days? Absolutely. But the spirit is not that they're sitting there watching streaming content, right? So students are using technology more and more in their learning. So it doesn't mean that they won't have screen time, if you will, but they're not sitting in class watching a streaming lesson like they would be at home. That doesn't mean that will never happen, but that is not the educational model that we're putting into place. That is a hybrid model that some districts have employed. So
in reality with that, Brian, can you really actually see the board from every seat in the classroom, the way that the desks are spread out?
There would likely be some that we would have to move and play with, but not perfectly, no.
And then I did want to ask about the metrics. I did want to go back because I think my understanding of it was confused, or I might not have the information remembered correctly. But I thought the metric that we had agreed to on the turnaround time, that it was an average of under 48-hour turnaround. So it would have to be below 48 hours on average for turnaround time, not a 48-hour to 72-hour turnaround, which would put the average above 48 hours.
I think it says it's averaging 48 hours, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go and actually pull it up, but
did we change the document from the September 3rd meeting?
No, it states as an average of no more than 48 hours.
Yeah, no more than 48 hours.
Yeah. And I would say we don't know what the average is because they won't give us an average. Right. So the time that they're quoting when you go get your test is 2 to 3 days.
So one would assume that would be over 48 hours though, right? 40, because we said it was 48 to 72, so that would be an average over 48.
I mean, I guess you could look at it in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Narissa, can I add something here?
Yeah.
Aaron, I just wanted to add, I'm familiar with a case that, a local case, a child was tested at Convenient Med in Newburyport. They had the results in 15 minutes. If you're asymptomatic, Convenient Med is getting them to you in about 15, 20 minutes. If you're symptomatic, if you're asymptomatic, they're giving the same 48 to 72 hour range for asymptomatic tests. So I just wanted to add that here.
All right. Anything else, Aaron?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Maureen?
I have a question for Brian. Brian, we have one COVID case now in the middle school, high school sports community. So if we were to vote tonight for a hybrid model, and in the next 7 days we have a couple more cases in the athletic community, what happens then? Do you make a decision to switch it? Because then we've gone, against our metrics. Do you make the decision? Do we have to come back together and decide? Do we go back to remote? Like how would that work?
It would be Brian's decision, basically. Okay. I think that's what we've said all along, is because this question has come up a couple of times, and that we have to post a meeting 48 hours before we can actually hold it. And that's a long time when you're talking about this, right? That's not a good reaction time. So So it would be Brian's call. And presumably we'd schedule a follow-up meeting, right, pretty quickly. But if that's happening on a Friday afternoon and the earliest we can meet is the next Tuesday night, that's a problem.
And I guess the only other thing I'm just curious about for other committee members, if I know Paul mentioned it, but about possibly approaching it as a phase-in. Has anybody else thought about that, or think it's something we should discuss?
I'll say too, that's something that I forgot to mention, is I like the idea that Maureen brought up in terms of phasing in, especially for the lower grades, and sort of continuing to look at who the high risk students are and getting that feedback from the younger elementary grade teachers to see who needs that additional help to be brought in, or if they can bring them back in a phased approach instead of bringing everyone back in hybrid mode. So I like that idea, and I would like to see more from the leadership team in terms of planning and expanding on that. I know Brian had mentioned earlier in the meeting that there's been a lot of discussions around that. So I'd be really interested to hear how those discussions are going, and also probably hear from some of the teachers and staff, if at all possible, in some of the upcoming meetings or the different schools. I think it would be nice to hear that.
So just to clarify, we've talked about kindergarten. We haven't talked at all about a phased-in approach. Again, that doesn't mean that it can't happen, but that has not been on our planning radar. I don't disagree with the approach. I would just, how to say this? I would just caution you that our negotiations with teachers have been going very well. It's been a very productive discussion. They've been contributing, right? This has been a mutual relationship, and it's been very good. These would be working conditions we're talking about. And so I believe we would need to raise that with the teachers to continue that discussion if we were going to bring something in differently. Because ultimately, as we've been developing the plan, agreeing the plan, we've been at the table all along. That topic has never been discussed. That's not true. We discussed it early and moved away from that phased approach. And so it hasn't been discussed again. So I think for us, and it may not be a hard thing to do, but I believe that we would want to go back to the table and at least have a discussion.
Who's next? Paul?
Yes, this is sort of that high school, elementary school split, that secondary elementary split is, as Brian mentioned a bunch of times, an odd one. I know yesterday in my class, I had a 10-minute back and forth through Google Meet with 3 of my students who weren't understanding a concept. And they're in their little breakout room of 3, and I was in front of my whiteboard, scribbling on my whiteboard, more or less like it would be in class. If I had a cluster of kids who didn't understand something, I'd be over at the desk helping them out. And I was trying to figure out how I would do that if they were in the room. And the answer I kept coming back to was I couldn't. I couldn't be with them while I couldn't be with them without talking at everybody else because of that spacing. I couldn't interact with them where they were at without involving the whole class. And then with that social emotional stuff, it's the same problem. If there's a kid in the class who needs a couple of minutes of close one-on-one attention because they have a behavioral issue or an emotional issue, how do I have that private conversation one-on-one with them or one-on small group? And I can't envision it in my room. And so I don't know how to have the emotional relationship. This morning I had one of my high needs students in obvious crisis, and his co-teacher popped into a breakout room with him and dealt with it. But how do I do that if the kid's in the room in crisis with 10 other kids and I can't get to him? Those are my concerns, or some of my concerns.
Anyone else? All right. So I always speak last, and I believe that as much as schools are for education, and it's our responsibility to oversee students' education in this district, we are also a social services organization. The question in the spring that I got hit with a bunch of times was, well, you know, when schools are closed, who's going to feed the kids? There should be an organization that does that. Why are the schools doing that? Who's going to take care of the kids? Well, the schools are closed. Someone should do that. Who's going to be doing that? The kids are in crisis. Who's going to take care of the kids? Because the schools are closed, and who's going to do that? There should be another organization that does that. And the reality is, there is no other organization that does that. That's us. That's our schools. And while we might want to be exclusively about education, we're also about childcare and making sure that parents can make it to work. And we're also about making sure that kids stay safe by spotting any issues that might be coming up and stepping in and providing a safe space and a safe ear for them so that if there's a problem, they can voice it. And we're also about providing mental health supports, detecting when there's an issue, figuring it out, and making sure that the care is taken for that student that they need. And I don't believe that we are doing that now to the best of our ability. I believe that some of our most needy students, the ones who need us the most to step in and be advocates for them, are getting lost. And while I would love to have the best educational experience for them, I think we have to face the fact that there are students that, no matter how hard hybrid is, are going to do better in hybrid than they're doing in remote now because they don't have the supports. And we need to be able to provide them the supports. And I think there are kids that are going to do better in remote. They have the supports at home. We have parents that are going to take advantage of that rather than sending their students into hybrid. And that's fine. They have the option. If they really need hybrid, then hybrid would be there for them. And if they really need remote, we have a remote option, and the administration is working to make that stronger. I would urge the committee to remember that we are a social services organization. We have become that. That's going to Brian's description and chart that we've seen year after year about when we have gotten a student enrollment drop to the point that a classroom teacher goes away, we have added supports. We have added supports for special education. We have added supports for mental health. We have added supports for all these different things. It's because we've become a social services organization. And while it would be nice to have someone that could step in and just do it for us, there is no one else out there that's going to fit that bill and be able to do all those things. I personally struggle with this. I see both sides. I've heard both sides, and to an extent I agree with both sides. But right now, I believe we have options for students that will meet their needs. And even if it's not the absolute best education that we could provide them in hybrid, it could conceivably be a heck of a lot better than what they're doing right now in remote. Is there anyone else that wants to speak before we take a vote? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say too, as far as the phased in approach, I love it in an idea, but I would really struggle. I have heard families and students make cases over the last weeks for who should be the first to come back and who should be considered high risk. And I've heard juniors because they need to prep for college, and I've heard seniors because it's their last year, and it's it's what's kind of holding them in doing the work for their final year of high school. And I've heard that it should be kindergartners, and it should be first graders, and it should be second graders, because they are our youngest learners. And I have heard that it should be sixth graders because they're going to middle school next year. And I've heard that it should be eighth graders because they're going to high school next year. And I've heard that it should be ninth graders because it's their first year of high school, and that's a huge transition. I think we could make an argument that every grade should be the first one in. I personally would have a really hard time making a decision to say who should be the first ones in the schools, that if we went with a phased-in approach. And I would also very much worry about the contract negotiations, as Brian mentioned, and also about childcare, because that's also a big concern. I know there are definitely high school students that are providing a lot of supports to elementary school students. And if we said, for instance, yeah, junior year, that's your year that, you know, you're really preparing for what's coming next in your life, whatever that might be, that could force some choices that would be really, really difficult. And I don't, you know, I don't know how that works at that point, because I just don't know how that works at that point. So my preference would be to vote, my vote will be hybrid tonight. And my preference would be to not go with a phased-in approach for those reasons, because I just think it's a tremendously difficult thing to determine which of those would get priority. Are there, sorry, serious faces. Are there any other comments? Questions? Can I get someone to make a motion? Oh, you can make whichever motion you want. Make a motion to transition to hybrid learning on October 13th, or make a transition, or sorry, make a determination to stay remote on October 13th. Please.
I'll make a motion to stay remote.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? I need a roll call vote then. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
No.
Sorry, hang on, getting my list here. Paulise?
Yes.
Linda? Linda?
I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can. What's your vote? Now we lost you.
Wow, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Say it quick.
No, I just have a comment to make. This isn't the way that I thought it was going to be honest with you. I'm going to have to say no.
Okay. Paul Mayette? You are?
Yeah, no, I'm still arguing with myself. I'm gonna go no.
All right. Tina? There you are.
Oh yeah, I just did that heavy breathe and I wasn't muted. Jesus, sorry guys. I'm gonna have to abstain.
Well, that leaves us at a hung vote.
Then my vote is no.
Your vote is a no? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And my vote is a no as well. So that would be 5-4 for, well, not staying remote, which would essentially be a move to hybrid. I don't love having split votes, but I appreciate all the time and attention and thoughtfulness that you've put in. This is clearly a difficult decision. It's rare that we're along, much of a split, much less almost an exact split. So,
Narissa,
yes.
Narissa, I just have to go back. I'm sorry to do this. I meant my vote is yes for remote. It's not.
Okay. So
I'm sorry, you guys.
So what I'm
My
going to do
vote
is
was yes for remote.
I'm going to take this vote from the top and have someone make a motion, and we're going to do the whole thing again because we essentially have to now reverse the vote that was already made since it's final.
Okay.
Make the motion to go remote.
All right.
Can I ask one clarification? And maybe you can do this while you're revoting. And I don't want to, the motion's the motion, but if there isn't going to be a transition, then I would suggest that there's something. Are you keeping with the same schedule? Are you reassessing in 2 weeks? Are you going to 4 weeks? So maybe that's a separate vote, but just to make sure that before you leave tonight, if you are not transitioning to hybrid, that you have a clear path about what's next.
Can I address that?
Of course. Yeah.
I would make a motion that we go remote, but that we stay on the same schedule that we have so that we reassess this periodically as we said we were going to.
So the
So
next
basically stay on the same schedule.
just pulling up the document to find due date.
So it'll be a decision on October 28th for a shift, not until November 10th.
Yep. That's what I'm seeing as well. Can you remake that motion, Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to stay remote, but that we embrace the same dates that we put down before so that depending upon the vote tonight, the issue is revisited on Tuesday, November 10th. I'm sorry. The decision date is on Wednesday, October 28th, 2024. Transition on Tuesday, November 10th, 2020.
Okay, thank you. Need a second.
Second.
I'll second.
Paul Goldner. All right. I need a roll call vote. Erin?
Yes, to stay remote.
Okay. Paul Goldner.
Yes.
Maureen.
Yes, to stay remote.
Caitlin.
No.
Paulise.
Yes, stay remote.
Linda.
No.
Thank you. Paul Mayette.
No.
Tina. Tina.
Yes. Sorry about that, guys.
All right, and I'm a no. So that is a 5-4 vote in the other direction then, to stay remote. I thank you all again for your time and thoughtfulness, and I will trust the superintendent will get out a communication to the district so that they know what the result of tonight's vote is.
Yes. Yep. I'll be quite honest. I did a whole lot more prepping for a shift to hybrid, but I will get a message out quickly tonight that just, nothing's changing then. Am I correct? Right. So we are staying where we are for another 4 weeks. And so
I personally would ask that you consider with the idea that the district would be hybrid at some point down the road, transitioning those elementary school classrooms now. I don't see a benefit in having those students stay where they are and with the teachers that they're with and continuing to build a relationship, and then potentially on November 10th, switching all that up.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't have an exact time frame, but for me, unless you tell us otherwise, this doesn't change the message that I sent out like I said, an hour ago before this, or an hour before this meeting, no, many hours ago, about electing the full-time remote option and moving forward with that planning, and to make anything where we're collapsing classes, still asking families to commit by Friday based on the model, and then asking them to commit early next week. But again, if we're not going to be shifting to Florida virtual or any of those shifts next on the 13th, we would at least start to plan for that. So at the 7th, at the middle school and the elementary, if we were collapsing classes, we would get underway with that. Yep.
All right, thank you.
So the message, so as I said, videos and a whole lot of other stuff ready to go for hybrid. So obviously that is not going out. So it'll be a very condensed message, just basically saying that we're staying where we are for another 4 weeks. Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the MASC Delegate Assembly. The MASC is canceled, and MASS too, have canceled their November conference, but they're continuing to hold their delegate assembly. It's on November 7th. I believe it's virtual. I meant to send an email earlier this week and ask about that. But we need to have a delegate appointed by the October, I didn't write down the date. I think it's like October 17th or something like that. And then later in the fall, we would need to actually review all the resolutions and give the delegates some advice to vote on the resolutions on behalf of the school committee. I have actually never been a delegate, so I don't have the experience. I don't know, Linda's been the delegate before. Is it, I don't think it's a huge commitment, right? It's like a couple hours.
Right, it's just listening to what the vote is and anybody who has an amendment to that vote. I can be the delegate if.
Great. Thanks for volunteering. Can I get a motion to appoint Linda Kofsky, the delegate, to the 2020-2021 MASC Delegate Assembly, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Paul. Is that Aaron seconding?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I need a roll call vote, please. Aaron?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paulise?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Tina?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations, Linda, on your new appointment as the delegate. Well, I don't think we need a meeting next week, which was going to be, unless you think we do still need one, Brian. My anticipation was we were going to need one before the change, so I asked everybody to hold next Wednesday on their calendars, but
No.
okay. All right.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I think when Brian puts out the notice, I think he needs to include that if it was a sharply divided school committee vote, and that it's very likely that hybrid is on the very near horizon. I think that's something worthwhile.
I'm not sure that's fair to say.
Well, just what I think, that's all.
A sharply divided vote, yes.
I was going to say, I'm comfortable stating the first because that's a fact. I just don't feel comfortable putting words into anyone's mouth.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, there are 9 of you taking a vote, and I clearly don't want to make assumptions, because assumptions, I end up being wrong. And so that's not fair for me to put words in any one of your mouths. So,
I meant to put it out just as a planning purpose for not only the parents, but also the teachers.
Well, definitely, the dates that
we
you
went
voted.
we went from 8-1 to, the vote tonight. So
yeah. So I think the concept of a sharply divided vote, I think is an important point to include. Yep.
All right, can I get a motion? So sorry, that leaves our next meeting as October 14th at 7 p.m. We do have a DCC tomorrow night. So if anyone from the school committee can make it, Brian and Maureen can't, so it's always appreciated. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? Paul, was that a motion?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Maureen, thank you. I need a roll call vote, please. Erin,
Yes.
Paul Goldner,
Yes.
Maureen,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Paul Lees,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
Tina.
Yeah.
All right. So Brian, thanks for coming tonight. Kaylee, your piece was beautiful. I was actually, would you mind forwarding that if you have it like written?
Yeah, of course, it's not properly formatted right now, but
That's quite all right. I'd just like to reread it if I could. Thank you. Brian, I'm going to let you do all the work so I don't accidentally kick out someone that I shouldn't.
Nursa.
Yeah.
Would you like me to just share the document with you or attach it in an email?
Doesn't matter. Whatever's easiest for you, Kaylee.
All right.
Thank you. And by the way, committee members, I'd just like to let you know that Kaylee is now a licensed driver. So congratulations to Kaylee.
Congratulations.
All right, I'm just gonna, there's still a whole bunch here.
Kaylee, if you wouldn't mind, would you forward that to everybody? I'd love to read that again as well.
Of course.
So I'm just gonna make a, so for anyone who is on the call still, the committee is going into executive session. So I need to remove you unless you voluntarily leave.
I can start.